Chapter 355. At 7:15, Luonan hurriedly ate a few mouthfuls of rice. He took the pie and the cup of milk that his aunt had forced onto him, and sat in his uncle's SUV. He displayed the extraordinary strength of a glutton. The car hadn't even driven out of the community when he finished eating the second half of his breakfast. He opened the car window and accurately threw the empty paper cup into the trash can on the roadside. His level of moving target practice was far beyond that of most people. Uncle Mo Haiheng shot a glance at him and closed the car window. "You're not guessing, right?" "How could that be? I didn't train in martial arts for nothing." Luonan still clearly remembered the scene of the two elders racking their brains at the head of the bed in the wee hours of the morning. He felt ashamed and subconsciously jested. "Look at my skill and accuracy. Uncle, take me to play with guns someday. I've forgotten where the doors of the shooting center face in the past few years." "Sure. It's rare for you to ask." Mo Haiheng straightforwardly agreed. Then he seemed to ask casually, "How have you been at school recently? I mean, have your social circles gotten a bit bigger?" Luonan felt that his uncle's words had a deeper meaning. He responded with a few words, but he was worried that he would be too vague. It would be hard to gain the trust of others. He just so happened to have a matter on hand, so he changed his tone and spoke. He was also asking for guidance. "Uncle, how do I cooperate with others? I recently had a club activity, so I formed a temporary team to do things together. I don't really understand how to do things properly." Mo Haiheng answered as he drove. "Since it's a team, you need to understand your role in the team. You need to be the leader or the planner. You need to know your place as a technician or logistics." This answer was too perfunctory. Luonan wasn't very satisfied. "This is from the standpoint of a team." "That's right. Since it's a cooperation, of course we need to talk about the team." Luonan rolled his eyes. "I want to work from a personal perspective. I want to know how to be respected in a team." Mo Haiheng looked at the road and didn't look at Luonan. He laughed and answered, "The concept of respect is too vague. There's no universal standard. Everyone's role is different. Their expressions of respect will be different as well. A fellow who considers himself a leader may respect his subordinates as praise. But if the person he praises doesn't consider himself a subordinate, will he feel respected?" "That's true. So if the environment is not formed, don't talk about the relationship in the environment. It can change at any time. For example, respect can be a reward, but it can also be a price. That temporary team of yours, we'll talk about it after it becomes a qualified team." Talking with an intellectual like his uncle was far too taxing on his brain cells. Luonan first shrank back. He half closed his eyes and looked again at Peony's evaluation in the internal report. Crow's professional level is unknown, and his initial judgment is that he's introverted. He's not good at communication and lacks initiative. It might be more appropriate to classify him as a support. There might be room for negotiation in future collaborations. This was his partner. The official operation hadn't even started yet, but she was already trying to seize power. What was even worse was that she was trying to bargain. Luonan admired Peony's eyesight and judgment, but this attitude inevitably made him feel uncomfortable. It also made him doubt Peony's structure. One had to know that this outsourcing was actually a compensation from Her Majesty the Martial Empress. No matter what, she would not discount it. Peony's words instead proved that her position in the firm was relatively ordinary. She hadn't felt the boss's pulse. Wait a minute, this isn't like Peony's style." Luonan picked at her words and suddenly realized something. The so-called bargaining might not be to cut off the amount of money for the outsourcing. Instead, it was to settle down on future solicitations. If this was the case, then it was quite brilliant. At the very least, she could understand part of Her Majesty the Martial Empress's intentions. Luonan still had to ask He Yuan before he obtained an answer. Luonan felt mentally exhausted to be on the same team as this kind of person, and to seize the upper hand. Mo Haiheng took the initiative to talk to him at this time. "I have a general idea of what you're thinking. You feel that you need to have a goal or a paradigm when doing things. If you really don't know what to do, then learn from me. I feel that we are quite similar. See if we're suited to each other." Luonan immediately teared up. I was waiting for you to say this. I have a motto. Take a look. Mo Haiheng sent him a message. It was very short, only 8 words. Those who set up don't set up. Those who cross over don't do. Luonan was stunned. He had read the classics as a child, and he had recently followed Gym Master Xiao to learn classical martial arts. He had crammed in some relevant knowledge, and he recognized these words from the sacred text of Taoism. These 2 lines said that if one stands on tiptoe for the sake of looking into the distance, one will not be able to stand steadily. If one takes large strides for the sake of speed, one will not be able to walk very far. After these 2 lines, there was another line. Those who see themselves do not understand. Those who are self-righteous do not reveal themselves. Those who cut themselves down have no merit. Those who are self-conceited do not grow. And so on and so forth. The general meaning was that one cannot rely on frivolous and impetuous behavior. The deeper meaning was that one must retreat in order to advance. Well, this was indeed a style of doing things. It was quite compatible with his uncle's usual low-key words and actions. But the current situation was not like this. Mo Haiheng did not know that Luonan was entangled in his heart. He asked, "Do you understand?" "I understand. Yes. Uncle, is there anything else?" "There is. For example, good deeds leave no trace. Good words leave no flaw." "I know. Then there's also to know the male, to guard the female, to be the stream of the world. To know the white, to guard the black, to be the style of the world. To be the style of the world. To be eternally virtuous, to return to the limitless. Simplicity is a tool. The sage uses it as a commander. Therefore, the great system cannot be cut." Luonan was scared. He simply memorized the entire passage in one breath. There were at least 80 similar sentences in the Book of Taoism, if not 100. But this was really not what he needed. Mo Haiheng laughed loudly. "Look. You clearly know what you want to do. Why do you need to ask me?" Luonan knew that he had been played. He was left speechless for a time. Actually, he wasn't interested in any kind of method. He didn't need to suppress others. If he had a choice, he would quietly stay in a corner and refine his external neuron. He would carefully experience this process and see what kind of result he would obtain in the end. However, he needed to do some things in order to obtain this peace. This entanglement was not something that could be explained to outsiders. Mo Haiheng used his finger to draw circles on his temple. "Let me guess what you're thinking about. You want to do something, but you don't know if you can do it. So you want to find a successful paradigm, like a set of formulas. You want to throw all sorts of parameters into it, and then you'll succeed?" Luonan made a sound. "Just for reference." Mo Haiheng nodded. He then shook his head and sighed. Nan, how old are you this year?" 16. "What a good age. When I was 16 years old, I knocked up a classmate's belly. My old man kicked me down the stairs. My mouth was broken from the fall." "Damn this gossip." Luonan's chin smashed against his chest. He didn't close his mouth for a long time. Mo Haiheng's gaze was fixed in front of him. He smiled gently, as if he was recalling a youth that would never return. But in the end, his gaze was still on Luonan's body. "It seems that I haven't beaten you since you were 10 years old. Right? It seems so. A child in his teens. Second puberty, and rebellious phase. What a wonderful period. You actually passed by just like that? Uncle, are you very disappointed that you didn't get the chance to beat me?" While Luonan was secretly ridiculing, new words poured into Luonan's ears. "Tell me, should I praise you for being mature for your age? Or should I worry that there are problems with your physical and mental development?" Luonan raised his head in surprise. He met Mo Haiheng's clear and cold gaze. He realized the serious attitude within. Humans have never been perfect creatures. The evolutionary history of this species is a history of trial and error. At most, they have decent luck. So society is very cruel, but it always leaves some room for trial and error. This is especially true for young people. Your grandfather's societal format chart only lists students. There is a group of people who pay tuition fees within it. His uncle's words had a scholarly seriousness to them. Luo Nan was a bit flustered. He didn't know what attitude he should use to respond. In the end, he could only respond with grunts. Mo Haiheng seemed to be interrogating him. Then Nan, you tell me. Why are you so stingy with your tuition fees? Are you prepared to press down on all the flaws and then lose everything in an even crueler stage? Luo Nan didn't even have the strength to respond with grunts. He felt that his uncle today was completely different from usual. Perhaps last night's matter made his uncle think a bit more. Was his uncle probing his attitude right now? Luo Nan really wanted to say that it was a misunderstanding. There wasn't some inexplicable organization looking for him. But if he thought about it a bit more, the nature of the situation he was facing was more or less the same. Wasn't this a problem caused by Her Majesty Empress Wu's group of people? His mind spun a few times, and he finally came up with words with great difficulty. So you're saying that I have to feel the stones and cross the river? You're saying that I have to fall down a few times? You guys are Uncle Wolf and Aunt Eagle, okay? Come on, I know that you don't like student activities, Uncle. Luo Nan did his best to disturb the atmosphere. He muttered. Know the male and know the female. Know the white and know the black. Know the honor and know the disgrace. Suffering losses is a blessing. I know how to carry, okay? Mo Haiheng looked at him calmly. In the end, he washed away all of his solemn and cold aura. He returned to his normal state and smiled. I hope so. Oh right. You need to keep your mouth shut about the matter I just told you. You don't really want me to beat you up, right? Luo Nan blinked. If you don't say it, then I need to have the courage to pay the tuition fees. Ouch. Mo Haiheng really did slap Luo Nan's ear. Of course, he didn't use any strength. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to slap Luo Nan, who had the heart lantern of the eye's orifice. The interior of the car became lively. The autopilot system displayed its proper function. Luo Nan knew that some things had truly become different amidst the laughter. He needed to get used to this change. The car hadn't yet arrived at Acumen College. Far away in a certain park in the Riverwu district, an enormous crow flapped its wings and took flight. It flew along the city's riverside greenery at a low altitude. The rubber band tied to the crow's leg vibrated slightly, transmitting real-time information to the crow. Chapter 356. In the driver's seat, Master Jean didn't change his gluttonous nature. He still held a bag of food in his hand, but this time he switched to a folk snack. It seemed to be donkey meat roast. 4 long and narrow pancakes were stacked together. The pancake and meat were thick. Master Jean just happened to take a bite when ink flew in. He bit through the oily red and yellow meat pancake, and the roast dregs and meat oil mixed into his beard. It was truly a mouthful. Luo Nan's senses were quite complicated when he saw this scene. He didn't know if he should be full or hungry. In contrast to Master Jean, Peony maintained absolute silence in the seat behind him. She held a book in her hands and was reading. It was a physical book that was rarely seen nowadays. It was a thin booklet. The printing was extremely exquisite, but it looked like it was frequently flipped through. The pages were curled up and looked old. Luo Nan sensed the book in passing. The words Mystic Dermic Lotus Scripture were written on the cover. He remembered that it was a Buddhist scripture. This was becoming more and more rare. Peony didn't have too much of a casual and charming attitude when she was reading. She sat upright, and her long and slender fingers lightly pinched the pages of the book. Ink crashed into the booklet with quite a bit of noise, but she didn't even raise her head. It wasn't arrogance. She was truly focused and serious. Luo Nan felt that the consciousness of the world was full of ridicule. First it was the Dea Dejing. Then it was the Mystic Dermic Scripture. What was going on today? Was someone going to bring a Bible over later? Ink didn't waste any words after entering the booklet. The civilian SUV started up and entered the high-speed magnetic rail. It followed the signs and sped toward the city. It was leaving the city. According to the plan, today's topic was still a meeting, but it was an on-the-spot meeting. Trigate Security arranged for the entire team to investigate the infiltration of the mutants on the spot. They also introduced more detailed information. Peony closed the book after the car started up. She even added a bookmark. She looked like she cherished the book. Perhaps this book had extraordinary significance to her? Luonan put himself in Peony's shoes and made a guess. However, Peony clearly wasn't prepared to discuss Buddhist scriptures or private matters with him. Her gaze shifted to Ink, and her eyes hooked into a charming arc crow. You nearly caused Mr. Ink to be late. The strange form of address and the corresponding person would make the heads of those unfamiliar with the team explode. Luonan thought of yesterday's small discussion regarding the form of address. That was the longest conversation they had yesterday. Perhaps Peony's preliminary judgment had largely originated from this? Luonan wasn't good at this sort of analysis, so he simply didn't care. He maintained his silence. Peony really did display quite the initiative. For the sake of increasing efficiency, we can change the team's mode of operation. For example, Mr. Ink can always be with me to avoid all kinds of unexpected and awkward situations. She didn't say what the awkward situations were, but Luonan could roughly imagine it. Peony asked again, "Does Mr. Ink need to recharge?" Charge? Luonan was stunned for a moment before he understood. Peony was inquiring about the mode of operation between him and Ink. He did not answer the question directly, but pretended a little. "If you don't mind, let it follow you for a few days. I'll be online anytime." Ink could also hear that the two were talking about it. Its pitch-black eyes looked at the slender figure in the back seat without blinking. "That's great." It seemed that Peony did not hear Luonan's tiny bit of malice. She just extended her hand and lightly patted Ink's grayish-white beak, teasing this giant among the crows. Then she said, "From the intelligence obtained yesterday, the target's main infiltration area is from the west of the Riverwood district all the way to the outside of the main city district. The environment of the recycling stratum is even more complex. I plan to find a temporary residence in the Riverwood district and conduct all-weather reconnaissance." Luonan immediately thought of his little nest in Blue Bay. Fine. Of course he wouldn't contribute it. He didn't have Peony's outstanding ability to analyze intelligence. If he could keep his mouth shut, he would do his best to keep his mouth shut. He would only speak after he arrived at the site to investigate. The civilian SUV shuttled through the early morning traffic. It took roughly half an hour to pass through the Riverwood district and the adjacent Forest Wall district. This was tantamount to driving out of the main city of Xia City, heading toward the Trigate district further west. According to the normal route calculations, it would take an hour to penetrate the outskirts of the wilderness along the highway of the satellite city. It would be a cinch to reach the Trigate district several dozen kilometers away. However, the actual situation was much more complex. It was impossible for the mutants that had infiltrated Xia City to advance along the highway. On the contrary, according to their instincts to seek good fortune and avoid calamity, it was more reasonable to detour around the heavily guarded main road of traffic. Not long after leaving the main city district, the civilian SUV left the main road. Its four wheels touched the ground, and it began its bumpy journey. Luonan had never seen such a bad road in his life. It was as if they had just passed through an air raid. There were craters everywhere. Old Jean, who was in the driver's seat, gripped the steering wheel and switched from autopilot to manual mode. Then he yawned, making it hard for the passengers to not feel complicated. Old Jean spoke a few words in the beginning, but most of the time he kept his mouth shut. He just filled his stomach in different ways. He was neither hot nor cold. He had the habit of clocking out and getting off work. Old Jean said that he was just a driver. Luonan didn't have any other requirements for a driver. He was just curious as to what the government of Xia City did for a living. This was a proper living area. He had been to the recycling stratum before, and the road conditions were much better than here. The two sides of the road had quite the style of the recycling stratum. There were low buildings scattered here and there. Many of them were temporary buildings, but they looked quite new. He could vaguely see children shuttling back and forth on the side of the road, laughing and playing. Luonan recalled the relevant information and confirmed that he was at the edge of the Trigate district. The Trigate district used to be the garrison of Xia City, and it had just been moved not long ago. The military was stationed all year round, making this place very different from the modern city. Traces of relocation could be seen everywhere. Someone contacted her through her wristband. "Hello, Miss Peony. I am Axel Thursday of Trigate Security. Please report your position. This fellow called Axel Thursday was an intelligence officer in the Trigate Security Operation Team. He was also responsible for liaison work. He was responsible for explaining the information during yesterday's meeting. He was quite an astute person. Peony simply shared her position and Axel Thursday quickly responded, I see you guys. A large container transport vehicle parked on the side of the road lit up its lights as soon as Axel Thursday finished speaking. The pitch-black body of the vehicle started up, indicating for Luo Nan and the others to follow. The civilian SUVs were quite suitable for the surrounding environment. As for the Trigate Security military and police transport vehicle, it was indeed convenient to transport equipment and personnel, but it was quite eye-catching here. The vehicle stopped by the side of the road, attracting the gazes of many people. After it started up, there were even children driving skateboards, small cars, and the like. They tailed along the way. It was quite lively, but it was also quite comical. The group of people passed through the inhabited area under this strange atmosphere, and drove to a relatively spacious area. Vehicles of all sizes stopped. There was a highland not too far to the right. A reservoir was built there, and the vegetation was dense. Though it was already late autumn, the deep green color was quite pleasing to the eye from a distance. The door of the container opened, and the personnel of Trigate Security jumped out with a clamor. Most of them had equipment in their hands, and they assembled it as soon as they landed. The interior of the enormous container was completely a modern command center. All sorts of instruments and equipment were perfectly arranged, and there were at least 30 people working inside. Intelligence Officer Axel Thursday walked out from the stream of people and walked toward the civilian SUV. Peony got out of the car as well. She extended a hand and shook his hand. Mr. Axel Thursday, Director Wu didn't come today? Axel Thursday had originally wanted to report this matter, but Peony beat him to it. His imposing manner unconsciously weakened, and the report turned into an explanation. Director Wu is participating in a last-minute meeting. He can't come, so he entrusted me to apologize to Miss Peony and Mr. Long 7. Long 7 is already here? Mr. Long 7 came a bit early. He said he was going to take a look at the reservoir. Oh yeah. Peony gazed into the distance, a faint smile on her face. She was dressed more or less the same as yesterday. She was dressed in a slim-fitting hunting attire, which suited her tall and slender figure the best. But this time, she didn't tie her hair into a ponytail. Her long hair was tied into a bun, and she used a wide-brimmed hat to hold it in place. The brim of the hat blocked her overly charming eyes, but the shadow that fell accentuated the contours of her face all the more. She was explosively handsome. Ink, who had just flown out of the car, had undoubtedly become a tool that served as a foil. The reservoir is the main point of our investigation. Intelligence Officer Axel Thursday had attended a lot of classes yesterday, so he unconsciously wanted to explain. Trigate District was originally a river. The largest freshwater river around Xia City passes through here and flows into the sea. It's just that during World War III, the military carried out a destructive project to prevent mutants from breaking through the defenses of the river. This project caused the river to change and the water to dry up. Nowadays it has already formed a low-lying area, but the underground water system is still extremely complex. We need to pay close attention to it. As he spoke, a 6 or 7-year-old brat suddenly moved in front of him. He opened his mouth and asked, "Are you guys here to attack the gangs?" All right. The children of the inhabited area had tailed them all the way, and they had finally arrived. They might be young, but they could tell that this side was the most attractive. Plus, there was a huge crow. It was very eye-catching, so they naturally gathered over. Gangs? It seemed that Peony was more interested in this topic than the history of Trigate District. Unfortunately, the impetuous brat was dragged away by his companions in the blink of an eye. He was strictly ordered not to speak any more nonsense. After that, the group of brats were only interested in the beautiful woman, the large car, and the crow. Not only did they forcefully crowd around, but they also wanted to take advantage of the situation. They climbed up the car, wanting to touch ink on the roof of the car. They forced the crow to fly into the air. Only then did they avoid being crippled by the claws of the devil. Very few children in the city are this wild. Peony's words seemed to have a deeper meaning, and Axel Thursday understood tacitly. Yes. They should be residents who migrated from the recycling stratum. It's said that a portion of naturalized vagrants have mixed in as well. Their social relationships are very complicated. It's also because the military didn't do a good job of handing over the defense. This area suddenly became a no man's land, and many people want to take advantage of the situation. Chapter 357. Today Long Seven wore an outdoor leather jacket, short riding boots, and a checkered scarf around his neck. He was like a male model walking on the runway. He was very flirtatious, and together with Peony, they formed part of the operation team's attractiveness. However, he himself was quite professional. His entire body was covered in dust, and his leather jacket was stuck with spider webs. Clearly, he wasn't just going to the reservoir to take a look. Long Seven casually patted the dust off his jacket and asked, "Is the power of the gang spreading faster than the government?" Axel Thursday didn't want to say anything, but Long Seven and Peony both stared at him. It looked like they were very interested in this topic, so he could only explain, "Do you see that road? It's the one that's been half repaired." When they left the city, people more or less noticed the old road that extended from the main city district. It was a two-way road with 12 lanes. It was very wide, but it was quite old. There were no high-speed magnetic tracks installed. The follow-up construction didn't keep up either. It still had a bit of shape when it extended from the city, but it was unknown where it started, but it was annihilated among the buildings. This road has a history of 30 years. It was originally designed as the main east-west road of Xia City, and it was connected to the war transport channel in the wilderness. But after superconducting technology became practical, the main road was laid out in the direction of the magnetic tracks, and this road became useless. Axel Thursday drew a dotted line on the digital map he had already projected, but its geographical location is still quite superior. Through this road, one can directly reach the recycling stratum of the River Wu district. Naturally, matters related to the underworld will be quite active there. Luonan recalled when he heard Axel Thursday say this. He had fought on this road before. It was that time with Jack. The gang was just a small interlude. Today's main goal was to discuss the next step of the operation. Actually, Luonan believed that Trigate Security would immediately begin their formal reconnaissance and search when he saw their posture. But whether it was Trigate Security, Peony, or Long Seven, they were more patient than he imagined. They continued to hold meetings. They held meetings in the old river, beside the reservoir, and in the inhabited area. One meeting followed another. Perhaps they never stopped. With great difficulty, the inhabited area came to an end. They followed the possible route of the target and gradually advanced toward the main city district. They could stop by the roadside at any time to conduct information collection and discussion. Perhaps from their perspective, this was a form of reconnaissance and search? Frankly speaking, Luonan was brimming with interest when he listened to the meeting yesterday afternoon. He was cautious and conscientious in the morning, but at noon his patience began to plummet. At the end of the day, he was already used to using supernatural abilities to solve problems efficiently and directly. He kept a respectful distance from mathematical problems like models and probabilities. Yes, Yuan had mentioned this tendency in her lectures. It was called extraordinary logic. This tendency was very common in the inner world. He just didn't expect that a rookie like him who had just joined would unconsciously be assimilated. When he looked at Peony and Seven Dragons again, he couldn't help but admire them. Of these two, one was an elite of the hidden indigo firm, and the other was a burner. They both belonged to the circle of the inner world, and it was unknown how they managed to overcome it. Luonan finally retreated in defeat. His mind completely returned to the campus, just in time for dinner. He and Shuelei didn't have the same classes in the morning, so they only met up after class and went to eat together. Acumen College's lunch break was extremely short. Only by eating a bit faster could they squeeze out some rest time. Luonan and Shuelei both had afternoon classes, so they were even more nervous. The two ate with their heads down. They only had the time to chat when they got on the tram that passed through the campus. Since it was lunchtime, Luonan talked about the matter of his eye orifice connecting last night. Shuelei naturally didn't hesitate to praise him. Nanster, you really are godly. You've already reached a higher level in the internal refinement technique. Shuelei was a bit emotional. Back then, I was just trying to make a living horse out of a dead horse. I wanted you to learn breathing techniques to reduce the pain. Who would have thought that you would advance by leaps and bounds like this? The gym master also said that you're the most diligent of all the students he has taught for so many years. Luonan laughed. I'm still thinking about what to do next. The gym master mentioned it before. Since we're starting from the eye's orifice, there's no harm in walking this path to the end. The so-called 7 orifices and 6 roots. The gate of life and death. The mysterious and the mysterious reflect each other's life. There are 9 orifices in the mysterious, and 6 roots in the release. One focuses on life, and the other cultivates one's nature. Shuelei said a few words that weren't very clear. Luonan had been diligently tutoring himself in this subject, so he understood the general meaning. Luonan wanted Luonan to put effort into cultivating his senses, moving from the eye's orifice to the ear's orifice, the tongue orifice, the mouth orifice, the nose orifice, and so on. He wanted to cultivate with the 9 orifices and 6 roots, to drive his internal organs, to cultivate his body, and to polish his nature. The gym master did mention it, but he only mentioned a few simple words. The specific steps and train of thought still require the gym master to personally write them out. Do you want to go tonight? Of course I want to go. I'll let the gym master evaluate me so that I don't make a mistake. In other words, the time he spent exploring the secrets of gear would be pushed back. This wasn't the first time Luonan felt that he didn't have enough time, but this sort of feeling would become more frequent in the future. Shuelei asked about the situation of the outsourcing business. He was more or less curious about this. Luonan picked a few interesting things to tell him, but he couldn't avoid mentioning the long suffering of the meeting. Shuelei listened with a grimace. We don't understand the world of professionals. If it were me, I'd probably collapse a long time ago. Your business is a bit different from what I imagined it to be. When will you be able to make a name for yourself? God knows. Luonan felt very conflicted in his mind. Actually, he really hoped to obtain some knowledge from this and harvest some benefits. But when he truly delved deeper, he was unable to keep up with the progress. He was able to understand 70 to 80% of what was said yesterday afternoon. But he was only able to understand 50 to 60% this morning. The ratio in the afternoon would probably be even more miserable. He had to admit. The relevant knowledge structure is far too lacking when compared to these professionals. Zhang Yingying wants me to seize the initiative. Take the initiative, my ass. Nanster, I think you're wrong. Shuelei shook his head over and over. The gym master said that the greatest taboo in cultivation is knowing half a thing. Piecemeal knowledge and opinionated logic, when combined together, is the road to death. If you can't keep up with your schoolwork, then you might as well not study at all. Therefore, the gym master's first task is to divide students into classes and grades. Teach students in accordance with their aptitude. Your current matter may not be that dangerous, but there's no point in listening to it any longer. I feel that what Sister Yingying said is quite correct. You should seize the initiative. How do I seize it? Sweat. How would I know? But I think that since Her Majesty Empress Wu has outsourced the business to you, no matter how much effort Sister Yingying has put into it, she will always have trust in you. If Her Majesty Empress Wu feels that you can do it, then there must be a way. Otherwise, wouldn't she be deliberately making things difficult for you? Shuelei's words were unintentional, but Luonan was listening intently. His mind was immediately stirred. Her Majesty Empress Wu outsourced the business to him. This was her way of compensating him. There was no reason for her to deliberately make things difficult for him. Her Majesty Empress Wu wanted to give him Peony as a partner. Her Majesty Empress Wu wanted to fill in the gaps. Otherwise, even if she was in the mood to give it to him, Luonan wouldn't have the face to ask for it. All right, Luonan had to admit that the professional standard that Peony displayed had scared him. Using the other's strengths to attack his own weaknesses obviously put him at a disadvantage in every aspect. Shuelei said. Actually, I feel that you've done quite well in the past. Back at Frost River Reality, Red Fox, Papercut, and the others went against you, but in the end, they were all convinced by you. Of course, there was also last week. We practically didn't help at all. You handled everything by yourself. Cough, I didn't. Don't be modest. I was chatting with Cragburst 2 days ago. He said that with that Devil Ray by your side, he could completely treat you as a B-rank power. Not to mention that heaven-defying pure sensing ability. Right now, your status in the Xia City branch is catching up to Old Man Yu of yesteryear. Hee, Old Man Yu didn't have 2 extraordinaries to back him up. Really? You've done quite well? Shuelei rolled his eyes. Let's not act cute with malice. Don't tell me you want me to praise you from the beginning? All right, I'm speaking the truth. I really agree with Cragburst's words. Your pure sensing ability is heaven-defying. I heard that Cat Eyes directly changed the direction of her abilities because of you. She's going to focus on long-range perception from now on. She's giving up on all-encompassing perception. Something like that happened. This was the first time Luo Nan heard of this. He blushed with shame for a time. In a certain sense, though Cat Eyes was his believer, this was an accident from start to finish. Cat Eyes was unwilling. Her emotions were unwilling. Luo Nan wasn't Nanbatian. He wouldn't force himself on her. Instead, he deliberately pulled apart the distance between him and Cat Eyes. Now it looked like he had pulled the distance a bit too far. All right, he was a bit distant from everyone. With the Hexa ear, it was very convenient to communicate on the psychic wave network. Shuelei had entered the society a month later than him. Shuelei could chat, fart, and listen to gossip. Shuelei could do anything. Luo Nan was the type of person who didn't have access to information. Character. Shuelei didn't know of Luo Nan's rueful thoughts. He continued, when we were chatting, I suspected that this ability of yours is still in the explosive growth stage. Every time you move, the number you obtain is different. Sister Yingying said that when you were at Frost River Reality, your soul-attached state had an upper limit of 500 meters. When your soul and body are united, the limit of your senses is 80 meters. But last time at Ocean Sky Cloud City, I was on the 88th floor, and you were on the viewing platform. You were on the 142nd floor. There were 62 floors in between. That's nearly 300 meters. You should have been in the soul and body united state back then. Luo Nan chuckled. This is the benefit of following the gym master in cultivation. Shuelei loved to hear these words. He immediately grinned until his eyes couldn't be seen. So Nanster, you don't need to worry about anything. There's no need to worry at all. In the entirety of Xia City, not counting the 2 extraordinaries, there's no one who can compare to you in terms of all-encompassing senses. These words sounded very familiar. Luo Nan suddenly asked, Did Yingying look for you to be a lobbyist? Shuelei's grin froze. Then he moved closer to Luo Nan with a fawning smile. I just feel that Sister Yingying's words are quite reasonable. I feel the same. Chapter 358. Luo Nan spoke very confidently. After all, most of it was just a joke. He wasn't in a rush to show off. Instead, he found a secluded place with Shuelei and earnestly finished his afternoon lesson. Only then did he return his attention to the marching team. Luo Nan's consciousness was attached to Ink's body. As expected, there was still a meeting going on over there. They just added a working meal. Peony and Long 7 both behaved very professionally, and Ink took the opportunity to display the important reason for its enormous body. It ate nearly a person's worth of food as a single bird. After lunch, the group of people had another meeting by the roadside. Ink was on the roof of the civilian SUV. The luggage rack was just right for its thick toes to grasp, so it stood steadily. It was just that his head was drooping, and he had already entered a half-asleep state. For birds, staying quiet for a long period of time, coupled with the effects of digestion, consumed considerable physical strength and energy. It more or less went against nature. Therefore, when Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts cut in, Ink quivered and cried out twice. It flapped its wings and flew without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, it flew under the radiant sun. Under the sunlight, Ink's black feathers were cool and refreshing. They trembled in the wind, suffused with a deep blue luster. It was actually a bit dazzling. The black shadow and the blazing sun fused together in a strange harmony, causing Intelligence Officer Axel though to click his tongue in wonder. Of course, he couldn't help but suspect that it was a bit funny. This crow is vigorous and mighty. It understands human nature. It can be called a divine steed. His voice fell, and Ink flapped its wings. It turned in a different direction and flew far away. Soon, it disappeared without a trace. Axel though grunted. He covered his eyes with his hand and looked at the sky. What's wrong? Peony didn't even raise her head. Don't mind it. Ink circled in the sky for a moment before finding its target. It slightly adjusted its direction, and soon it arrived above the old road that cut through the city. It flew along the road. Although he said he wanted to take the initiative, he didn't immediately give orders to the operations team. Luonan couldn't use methods as heavy as shame in a short time. His many years of experimental experience had forced him to develop a cautious personality. As long as his brain wasn't overheated, he didn't mind collecting a bit more data and information to use in his judgment. The operations team was doing similar things. Unfortunately, their fields were too different from Luonan's expertise. They couldn't be used by him. It was also thanks to Zhang Yingying's persuasion that he came to his senses in time. Otherwise, it would only be a waste of time if he kept following behind the operation team. Of course, the first thing Luonan needed to do before everything began was to test the upper and lower limits of Ink's abilities, especially the range of his perception. This was the fellow that made a living. He could not afford to make any mistakes. According to Luonan's experience, the sensing radius of the out-of-body state, the unity of body and soul, and the fulcrum of the believer were different by an order of magnitude. In other words, under the premise that his out-of-body senses could reach up to 20 kilometers, the limit of a normal fusion of spirit and body was 2 kilometers. For a believer, like Ink, it should be around 200 meters. If he deliberately strengthened it, it would increase even further. However, based on past experience, Ink's brain capacity was probably not enough to process information that was too complicated. Packet loss and frame drop were very normal things, and it still needed some time to adjust. Truth be told, this was work that should have been done a few days ago. It was just that Luonan had too many things on hand, so he kept forgetting about it. He pushed it back until now. Let's test the upper limit first. The situation was a bit unexpected when Luonan actually did it. Where was the packet loss? It was as if a high-speed magnetic track had opened up between Luonan's main body and Ink. The relevant information did not need to be transferred at all. No, it seemed like there was no transmission process. The distance in space was warped for some reason. This feeling was strange and familiar. Luonan spent a bit of time to recall. He finally remembered with great difficulty that he had used the life sketches to draw the Star River in Frost River reality. He seemed to have used this method to pull the Wraith sign over. The Wraith sign evolved into a Colosseum and fought with the human-faced arachnid raised by the Order of Justice. After all, the Wraith sign was a Darksider species. It was an existence that belonged to the mental plane. It made sense for it to be summoned. Ink had a material form. Could this peculiarity be reflected in the transmission of information? In any case, with the existence of this connection, the only factor that limited Ink's detection ability was the limit of its own capacity. This made things much easier. Ink was the most commonly used living test subject during Luonan's repeated experiments. Naturally, it had its miraculous aspects for it to be able to live safely until now. And in Luonan's formatting theory system, it had already leaped to the level of a staff member. Its connection with Luonan was even closer, and this further catalyzed its basic abilities. Luonan was itching to give it a try. Ink transformed into a shadow, sweeping past the buildings on both sides of the old-fashioned highway. From Luonan's perspective, Ink was like a scout released in a strategy game. The fog of war was peeled away everywhere it passed, revealing a passageway that was 200 to 300 meters wide. However, The scene of reality revealed was mostly illusory. What was more dazzling to the eye was the floating and changing constellations of stars and the river of stars. Luonan didn't have any clear thoughts right now. In any case, he just needed to display his specialty. His specialty wasn't just the all-encompassing perception that forced Cat Eyes to change her profession. Just this matter alone, he felt that the starry sky constructed from the life sketches should be more suitable. Right now, a small starry sky was opened up with ink at the center. It resonated with the hazy star river that his main body sensed from a distance, covering the existence of all living beings within this range. Luonan feared that his clairvoyance would be insufficient. He honestly scanned the composition of each group of stars one by one, not wanting to miss a single detail. Peony didn't contact him during this period of time. He simply scanned the entire way at a speed of around 80 kilometers per hour. But after scanning for half the afternoon, the school's society activities were about to begin. Luonan reckoned that he was about to fly back to the main city district, but he didn't find anything. Luonan began to feel the difficulty of this task. He didn't have a particularly clear train of thought for the time being, so he could only work hard. A scanning radius of 200 to 300 meters was already the best in Xia City, but it was still too clumsy in the face of the enormous city district and suburbs of Xia City. Ink's sensing radius is still too small. Should I switch to my main body? A special sensation suddenly flickered while he was pondering. Luonan was overjoyed. It didn't matter if it was the target or not. His attention was instantly focused on it. A speck of bright light fell beneath the starry sky constructed from the life sketches, imprinting itself onto the star atlas. The surrounding scenery materialized layer by layer, revealing the concrete scene. Luonan sighed when he truly saw it. He was greatly disappointed. This should be the recycling stratum of the Forest Wall district. It was a place where people gathered. The target he had just scanned wasn't a mutant, but a middle-aged man. He wore a rather special robe, a bit like child's robe. It was light gray in color, and it looked very simple. The middle-aged man was located in a sealed house. The area wasn't large, but the decorations were filled with a ritualistic feeling. He stood in front of the stage like a priest, reading the teachings of scripture to others. Luonan's overly anxious gaze was too close to the material plane, triggering quite a bit of activity. The middle-aged man seemed to sense something, and his head tilted a bit. He was a bit confused. Luonan immediately thought of a secret order when he saw this scene. This place really did seem like a religious site. Oh, so it was an ability user. The Explorers Society of Xia City, the Order, the government, the military, the financial groups, and so on. The number of ability users didn't even reach 2,000. It wasn't too many, but it wasn't too few either. Luonan had randomly bumped into one. Should he say that his luck was good or bad? That's right. The difference between ability users and normal people on the life sketches level was far too great. Oh my, he was really stupid. Luonan, who was at school, slapped his forehead. Ink's flying wings nearly curled up. Fortunately, it reacted midway through its descent and fiercely flapped its wings to recover its altitude. Luonan didn't even think for half the afternoon. The life sketches of ability users were already this special. Naturally, mutants were even more different. This was an obvious fact. He had come to a similar conclusion before, but he had actually wasted half the afternoon on this. Luonan was drunk on his own brain. Now that he had bumped into someone else's preaching scene, it was more or less Luonan's fault. He didn't want to complicate matters, so he wanted to unfollow them. But in the end, he subconsciously swept his gaze over and felt an indescribable familiarity. He focused his mind and saw a familiar face. Yes, he looked a bit familiar. He just saw him today. It was the same child who jumped out to ask the members of the action team if they were going to strike down gangs at the reservoir. This child looked to be 5 or 6 years old at most. He was quite eye-catching in the midst of a group of adults who were listening to the preaching. He was actually attending class here? Xia City's traditional political power was quite powerful. In terms of religious belief, they adopted the principle of minors should stay away. Adults should make their own choices. A little child running over from far away to listen to a priest's sermon was against the rules, even if he had parents following him. Luo Nan's thoughts just spun, but he didn't think too deeply about it. After all, it had nothing to do with him. But Luo Nan came to a realization when he saw this child. The distance he flew out seemed to be a bit too far. It was over an hour's journey. If something happened, he wouldn't be able to respond to Peony. He decided to go back the way he came. And at this time, the priest of some unknown religion announced the end of today's preaching class, perhaps due to his restless mind. The group of people withdrew from the room in an orderly manner. As for the child, he came out wrapped in the crowd. He lifted up an electric scooter from the side of the road and followed the old road to the west. He's alone. Luo Nan discovered something unreasonable. Moreover, the electric scooter the child was driving had clearly been modified. Using Ink's speed as a reference, the speed definitely exceeded 50 kilometers per hour. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the scooter was traveling as fast as lightning on this simple and unobstructed structure. Luo Nan broke into a cold sweat for the child as he watched. There weren't many cars on this abandoned old road, but as long as they dared to go on the road, they would more or less be related to gangs. They would run amok, seeking excitement. What the hell was the child doing? Luo Nan thought for a bit. They were going the same way anyway. Let's just follow. It was better to be safe than sorry. If something really did happen, Luo Nan would feel uneasy. Ink flew in the sky, but the child was completely unaware of it. He rode the scooter, gripped the handlebars, and sped along at high speeds. He was quite at ease. When there was a slope, he would even play a few tricks. He was like a living monkey. His ability to balance was quite strong. Luo Nan was a bit impressed. Chapter 359. The little monkey was quite young, but it was already a super player on this old-fashioned road. It was able to drive the simple and crude electric scooter to the effect of a high-horsepower motorcycle. Luo Nan followed it for a while, and confirmed that there were no problems with the little fellow. He stopped staring at it all the time, and went to study his own matters. He switched to clairvoyance, allowing the starry sky to be deep and the starlight to spread out. He only searched for special structures within. Of course, if he could see dark clouds that covered the starry sky, then it was definitely a big fish. But at this time, the enormous population base of Xia City revealed its astonishing influence to Luo Nan. The contrast between 200 million and 200 million was a ratio of 1 in 100,000. It was destined that ability users and mutants were not easy targets to see. Ink's clairvoyance had a radius of 200 meters. Even a professional like Cat Eyes would be ashamed to death. But in front of the metropolis of the present age, it was still not enough. Front, back, left, right, up, down, and down, the stars were more or less flowing and arranged. Their structures were all mediocre. They were generally similar, and normal people were still the overwhelming majority. No matter how dazzling the starlight was, looking at it for a long time would make one dizzy. The hazy star atlas and its complex structure were like a maze. Contact with it too much, and one would feel fear. Luo Nan really wanted to turn it off and not look at it, but when he considered that the target was alive and could move at any time, and that the star atlas was constantly changing, he could only grit his teeth and persevere. Perhaps it was because he had seen it too many times. He didn't know when, but he felt that there were some other laws and principles within the mediocre and repetitive star atlas. There existed a minuscule amount of brightness. Perhaps it was a misconception. At the very least, the little monkey down below had its own characteristics when he looked at it the entire way, but it was still a bit lacking when it came to clearly distinguishing it from the others. Ink had to take care of the little monkey's speed, so it took an hour and a half to fly back to its starting point. Peony's exploration had come to an end, and they had returned to the vicinity of the inhabited area from before. They had missed each other, so Ink could only go back and continue traveling with the little monkey. Fortunately, this kind of good deed that was hard to come by in return soon ended. The little monkey bumped into his companions in an open space outside the inhabited area, and they immediately joined in the playing army. Ink hovered in the air, taking in the situation below. Behind them, Luo Nan felt a bit emotional. It was hard to tell the ages of these kids, but they were at least 5 or 6 years old. At this age, Luo Nan was already attending early education institutions. He didn't have the chance to be this crazy. Speaking of which, the trend of early education was overwhelming, and almost no one was spared. The settlement area had become a paradise. This wildness and freedom did not seem like the style of the residents of the metropolis. It seemed that the rumors of naturalized vagrants mixed in were not groundless. From another perspective, after the little monkey joined his companions, the subtle difference on the corresponding star maps was magnified, but it was still not clear enough. Luo Nan simply had find a green belt and stop on a tree branch to observe from a close distance. There was probably no way out if he were to look everywhere. He might as well lock onto a limited number of targets and see if he could find some patterns and clues. He was going to draw an even more detailed life sketch for the little monkey and his companions, and then examine the differences within. As soon as he figured out the direction, ink was discovered by the group of sharp-eyed kids. That big crow from this morning. It wasn't just someone who shouted, but it immediately attracted a group of people to watch. There was even a kid who threw a stone, hoping to catch it in one go. This action immediately drew a reprimand. "What are you being impatient for? My dad has a net shooting gun in his car. Let's catch it alive. We can use it to trade with that group of people later. We'll pay a high price." Sweat, this group of brats. Compared to his companions, the little monkey was quieter. He didn't respond, which comforted Luo Nan. "You're not an ingrate. I didn't look after you in vain." But no matter what, one little monkey was no match for a dozen or so brats. Luo Nan didn't want to be played as a target. He immediately flapped his wings and flew up. The group of kids became anxious upon seeing the situation. They had already treated ink as a dish on their plate. They found it hard to accept seeing a cooked duck fly away. Rocks flew like rain amidst their shouts and shouts, but it was useless. The kid who volunteered to take the net shooting gun moved quickly. His dad's car was right by the side of the road. The kid opened the trunk and took out the net shooting gun. He took a look and was about to pull the trigger. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt dizzy. His feet were in a mess. The ground was like a wave, rippling back and forth. He pulled the trigger, but he didn't know where the gun was pointed. "It's an earthquake. It's an earthquake." In the past month, the frequency of earthquakes in Xia City had decreased. Most people were familiar with this feeling, but the people who stayed in the temporary inhabited area were still very sensitive, due to the strength of the buildings. Especially when the feeling was so intense right now. Some children's legs even went soft and they fell to the ground. A few adults who were watching the excitement from the side of the road were flustered by the children's shouts. But most of them were still baffled. Earthquake? They didn't feel anything. Of course they didn't feel anything. This was because Luo Nan had used ink to release an attack on the mental plane. It was only targeted at the group of kids. The magnitude of the attack was actually very slight. It wouldn't hurt anyone. It was just that their reactions were slow and their minds were dazed. Ink flew high into the sky, leaving behind a pile of chicken feathers. This represented the end of today's search operation. Luo Nan's plan to seize the initiative and amaze the world with a brilliant feat didn't come to fruition in the end. It was still the same. $1 million business wasn't easy to do. It was the same even if it was compensation. After an entire day of torment, Luo Nan finally realized that there were many things in this world that couldn't be won in a single spurt of energy. His state of mind unconsciously calmed down quite a bit. Searching for mutants wasn't a particularly urgent matter for him. On the contrary, he was tossed around by the hazy starry sky for a long time. That feeling of being clear yet not clear and having no direction at all was especially annoying. And so Luo Nan knew that he cared a bit more about formatting theory and cultivation itself. When night fell, he simply tossed ink to peony. He didn't have the leisure to go prying on people's privacy for the time being. Instead, he went with Shuelei to Divine Yu Gym and Bashan Building. It was said that Gym Master Xiao would be moving in a few days. Luo Nan believed that the gym was deserted, but he never expected to see the brightly lit front courtyard when he entered. There were many figures. They were the parents of students waiting outside the front courtyard practice field. Luo Nan was baffled. Aren't classes already suspended? It's the last class. The gym master feels that the progress of Foundation Class 5 just so happens to be stuck at a node. He wants to teach them for a few more days. It would be a lucky chance if there are students who are able to gain enlightenment. The classes for the next few days are all free. Oh, this was something that Gym Master Xiao was capable of doing. The classes were almost over by the time they arrived. They followed Shui Lei's instructions and directly entered the practice field. They saw Gym Master Xiao. Luonan simply stood stupefied at the entrance. Chapter 360. Xiao Shenyu, who taught children, was very different from usual. He was completely different. The gloomy and cold expression that Luonan was most familiar with had flown off to God knows where. What Luonan saw was a middle-aged kindergarten teacher with a relaxed expression and a smile. His forelimbs were on the ground. His body arched as he crawled. His figure was stretched, and his spine swayed. He was like a large lazy cat. A group of 7- or 8-year-old children were imitating him. They meowed happily, and they even developed new skills on their own. They flipped, rolled, pounced, and twisted. It was quite lively. Luonan was truly dumbfounded. Shui Lei felt the need to explain. Cough. This is the cat form that the gym master created specifically for children. You might even be able to see the dog form in the future. It walks the path of the god of imagery. You know, the children in the city are more familiar with these two animals. It's easier for them to refer to. Really? Luonan was still a bit absent-minded. Shui Lei understood what Luonan was thinking. He said, "The gym master has always been the most amiable to children. Back in the day, when I was in the basic class, it was like the spring breeze and rain. But when I transferred to the specialized class, I was personally taught. Oh my God." He felt nostalgic, and he grimaced in pain. He felt quite complicated. Xiao Shenyu had already seen them, but his reaction was very calm. It was impossible to see any misgivings about his image collapsing. He was still on the ground, leading the children to crawl in circles. They fully stretched their limbs and moved their joints. He even reminded them to control their breathing. The scene could be described as chaotic but orderly. It was under control from beginning to end. Xiao Shenyu practiced in this manner for another round before getting up. He signaled for Luonan and Shui Lei to come over. The children were still dominating the field, playing crazily. Oh, practicing. Luonan and Shui Lei carefully circled around the group of overly energetic little fellows, and stood next to Xiao Shenyu. Gym Master Xiao's expression had indeed returned to its usual calm state. It was as if the lazy, relaxed, and carefree expression from before were all an illusion. Luonan wasn't stupid enough to take the initiative to mention it. He just obediently reported his recent cultivation progress. Xiao Shenyu asked a few details, confirming that Luonan's progress was real and effective. He didn't look surprised, just nodding. In the end, he said, "You've finished cultivating in the eye's orifice. Your progress is fast, and your foundation is solid. You should have talent. Continue cultivating along the path of the 9 orifices and 6 roots. There's no need to stick to the order. Try everything." Try everything? You'll only know if you've tried it yourself. Xiao Shenyu didn't think there was much to say, so he brushed it aside and changed the topic to what he thought was more important. Start from the 6 roots and 9 orifices, and sense the surroundings. Worldly thoughts are like a tide, which is very dangerous for cultivators. Therefore, true knowledge and clear vision is especially important. Knowing oneself is true. Knowing others is clear. Knowing others and knowing oneself cannot be biased. Actually, Luonan did not quite understand, but when he heard Xiao Shenyu talk about understanding people, he could not help but think of the events that had tormented him for the entire afternoon. He could not help but ask, the people of the world seem to be thousands and thousands of different, but when it comes to the level of life, the myriad streams return to the origin. The differences are extremely small. And there are many things that seem right, yet are actually wrong. How in the world should we distinguish them? Xiao Shenyu glanced at him and gently nodded in approval. When Luonan described his extraordinary cultivation progress just now, it was nothing more than this. We cultivators know ourselves and know others. We should start from 3 places: the root receptacle, the root nature, and the root trigger. These three things, whether it is teaching others or self-cultivation, must be seen clearly. Root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger? Luonan had a stupefied expression. This is the language of the Shurjia. It has been borrowed, but it has been slightly mutated. The so-called root is the root of growth. According to your words, it is the basic order frame of a person. Xiao Xinyu had spoken to this point, and Luonan understood. As for the differences between the three, the one that can hold objects is the tool. It is the quantity that can hold. The one that creates good and evil is the nature. It is the discrimination of direction. The one that moves appropriately is the trigger. It is the fate of receiving the law. Simply speaking, one must look at one's aptitude when looking at the future of cultivation. This is divided into talent, temperament, and destiny. Only by understanding all of these elements can one choose the most suitable technique for a person. Only then can one choose the most suitable person for a technique. Luonan felt that Xiao Xinyu was not only teaching him how to cultivate, but he was also expounding on the teachings themselves. As a teacher, these were undoubtedly words that came from the bottom of Luonan's heart. It wasn't just Luonan. Even Shuelei pricked up his ears to listen carefully. There is an ancient saying that the path transforms the virtuous and the foolish. Let's not talk about the controversial points. Schools have different doctrines, and there are many differences in the disciples they accept. This is obvious. Most of these differences come from the root receptacle, the root nature, and the root trigger. The principles are easy to understand, but the important point is how to distinguish them in reality. Shuelei, you don't need to listen to what I'm about to say. Your root receptacle is thick, and your root nature is simple. The root trigger should be activated for a long time. What you need is a pure intent. There is no benefit in learning these techniques of reasoning and reasoning. Shuelei shrunk his neck, and he obediently walked far away to act as a temporary instructor for the children. Luonan seemed to understand something. Xiao Xinyu had actually treated Shuelei as a living example. He had demonstrated to Luonan how to distinguish and utilize the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger. The results were naturally excellent. Luonan already had a bit of a plan in his mind. Listen carefully. Xiao Xinyu gave Luonan another reminder. Then he imparted Luonan the specific techniques of distinguishing the tool, nature, and mechanism. This technique was actually a summary of experience. Aside from a keen and penetrating state of mind, one also needed a wealth of life experience to support it. Right now Luonan had only learned the basic principles. He was still far from truly crossing the threshold. However, this bit of principle was already quite outstanding, especially the standard of clairvoyance and judgment. It pointed to the most profound and subtle level of the human body and mind. It vaguely corresponded to some of the problems in Luonan's formatting theory. Especially this afternoon. Luonan felt his soul strength stir. He scratched his ears and cheeks for a time. He really wanted to return to the settlement in the Trigate district and stare at the little monkey and those wild little ghosts. He wanted to look at them in detail once more. Unfortunately, he was destined to be unable to do so tonight. Xiao Xinyu gave a rare warning to Luonan. He needed to make Luonan comprehend the marvels within. Speaking of this technique, I will teach you this technique tonight. I know that you have a thoughtful personality. You are suited to study and research. I also know that you have a deep and solid foundation. It is enough to bear the burden. You took the initiative to ask, and you seem to be pointing at something. You should have encountered a corresponding problem. It just so happens that you have the tool, nature, and mechanism at the same time. It is like the return of spring to the earth. It awakens and hibernates all living things. It is born naturally. Although its nature is soft, its nature is firm. The results should be pretty good. Luonan nodded fiercely. Now he somewhat understood the true meaning of the phrase. If one hears the path in the morning, one can die in peace in the evening. Of course, it would be too much of an exaggeration to say that Luonan wanted to die. It would be best if he could happily verify it a few times. Chapter 361. He just so happened to hear Xiao Xinyu's words. He was very surprised. Gym Master Nanster just opened one orifice. If you suddenly teach him so much, he might not be able to digest it. He might not have been able to in the past, but now there's no problem. The cultivation of the 9 orifices and 6 roots is nothing more than a dual cultivation of life and death. He has made progress in the cultivation of his nature arts, but the imbalance is still there. There's nothing wrong with advancing courageously in the aspect of life arts. In layman's terms, nature arts were the cultivation of the mental side, while life arts were the martial arts of the fleshly side. Luonan could understand these words, but what did made progress mean? It seemed to have nothing to do with the progress of the eye's orifice. Luonan had deep faith in Gym Master Xiu's insight, due to his foundation in the art of dividing objects, nature, and mechanism. His thoughts turned, and he unconsciously thought of his special experience at Gear in the early hours of this morning. He was a bit distracted. Suddenly, his mind became alert. Someone was reaching over with a hand. He instinctively slid his shoulder, but it was useless. Gym Master Xiu pressed down on his shoulder, and exerted a bit of force, indicating for him to change his posture. Crouching tiger form. Luonan hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he obediently knelt on the ground. He stretched his back forward and pressed his elbows. His legs naturally curled up, and he transformed into another big cat, but this time he was sleeping. This movement was one of the Douyin techniques he had learned. It was not difficult at all. Plus, after many days of practice, he had already connected with the will of the mind. When he assumed this posture, it naturally resonated with the true meaning of mimicry. He was like a fierce tiger taking a nap in its lair. It was tight yet not tight, loose yet not loose. Amidst the laziness was the tension of a king of beasts. It caused his mind and body to be in a marvelous state of relaxation and tension. Xiu Shenyu squatted down and pressed down lightly on Luonan's head. He spoke. Frankly speaking, Luonan was unable to hear what Xiu Shenyu said. He just felt that the vibrations of the sound waves did not seem to be transmitted through the air. Instead, they flowed along Xiu Shenyu's palm and seeped into his brain. They were like thunder. The sound of thunder entered his brain, stimulating the apertures of his head and face to vibrate. Then it spread to his entire body. The thunderous vibrations pushed forward layer by layer, causing the body chakra to shake first. The internal links were subdivided, the 9 apertures, the 5 zangs, and the 12 joints all resonated. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind all knew where they were. At this time, Luonan was able to clearly distinguish Xiu Shenyu's voice. The experience brought about by the thunderclap and the new knowledge involved had already become a kind of verification. It was tantamount to synchronizing memories between the body and the mind. In this way, the body gear constantly rotated, and the god gear corresponded with each other. They coupled and moved in unison, constantly correcting the details. Gradually, Luonan ignored Xiu Shenyu's words. His entire mind was focused on the fine adjustments of the frame of body and soul. He looked at how the blood, energy, and fluid transformed layer by layer between the internal organs. It was like flowing water in the mountains. It flowed and permeated above and below ground, between the cracks of soil and stone. When it reached a certain degree, Luonan's thoughts stirred slightly. He felt the vital energy of his heart, spleen, and stomach boil. His blood and energy flowed upwards. As for his brain and face, he felt a slight turn, and his mouth was suddenly filled with saliva. It was sweet and moist, as if he was drinking nectar. Combined with Xiu Shenyu's teachings, Luonan was clear on the direction of his next step. The orifice of the heart was the tongue. The orifice of the spleen was the mouth. Although the mouth and tongue were separated, they were actually one orifice. And in classical theory, the heart and spleen and stomach were said to be external and internal. Luonan had opened up the 2 organ systems of the heart and spleen at the same time. It looked like there was some truth to this. Before formatting theory had truly taken shape, Luonan had first developed the appetite king skill. He could digest food and provide his body with sufficient energy. The function of the spleen and stomach was amazing. And ever since he started practicing martial arts, his body's blood and energy were vigorous and healthy. It was said that the heart governs the blood vessels, and it was suitable for the dispersal of the liver energy. Wasn't there a saying that wood feeds fire, and fire feeds earth? In this way, the liver, heart, and spleen, these three systems were linked to each other. Whether it was the specific circulation of blood and energy, or the enigmatic promotion and suppression of the 5 elements, everything made sense. Luonan didn't delve too deeply into it. He paid more attention to experience when it came to the circulation of the body gear. He felt as if a pool of nectar had opened up in the root of his mouth and tongue. Saliva overflowed from time to time, sweet and nourishing. Then there was the heart, the spleen, and the stomach. It utilized the mechanism of the organs to transform external energy into internal energy, allowing the essence to be filled and solidified. His vital energy boiled and spread throughout his muscles and tendons. A thin layer of sweat appeared in the blink of an eye. It could be said that his blood and energy were unobstructed. Luonan had been in the crouching tiger stance for too long. There were some children on the training field who saw Luonan lying on his stomach. They thought that Luonan was just like them. They meowed and pounced over. Shuelei jumped in fright. He wanted to block Luonan, but he was blocked by Xiaoxinyu, who had gotten up. The child didn't know how to control his weight. He directly bumped into Luonan's body. Luonan was still in a state of subtle comprehension. He didn't move, but his body was soft, smooth, and pliable. It was as if he had no bones. Bumping into him didn't hurt at all. The child rubbed and rubbed, having fun. Quite a few people followed suit. They laughed and laughed as they crowded over. They treated Luonan like a large pillow. They pressed and bumped into him without stopping. If Luonan continued to comprehend at this time, he would really become an immortal. A low growl came from his throat, and his body stretched out like a sleeping tiger. He stretched his back, and his skin and muscles naturally shook with force. Hidden energy surged out. The children around him fell to the ground, but not a single one was injured. Luonan saw the ground full of laughing children, and his childishness was aroused. He rolled on the ground like a cat or a tiger. His forelimbs stretched out, and his muscles relaxed. He looked vivid and lifelike. The group of children went crazy. They screamed and pounced over when they saw Luonan. Xiaoxinyu finally called for them to stop. Luonan had been stimulated by an opportune moment. He was instantly enlightened, but his foundation wasn't firm. There was a risk of failure if he continued to play. Xiaoxinyu waited for Luonan to stand up before speaking to Shuelei. His muscles and tendons have all been nourished. From now on, he can practice fist techniques. Starting tomorrow, you will be training with him. Training with him the moment he comes up? Does he have the time to slowly learn fist techniques? Xiaoxinyu's lips curved into a mocking smile. He's just getting used to his physique and training his reactions. At most, he'll be able to learn a few moves of fist techniques. In any case, his ambition doesn't lie here. Shuelei looked at Luonan, and Luonan scratched his head. The gym master is amazing. From Luonan's perspective, the progress of his cultivation was manifested in his fleshly body and in the operation of the body gear. However, it was not easy for him to explain in detail. After all, there were far too many specious things in classical theory. He was just a dabbler in it, and he didn't fully understand many concepts. Most of them were instinctive actions and body memories. Tonight, what truly touched his soul was another set of knowledge that Gym Master Xiao had imparted to him. It was the theory of the root receptacle, the root nature, and the root trigger. This set of knowledge was like a clear boundary and outline. It made his mind feel much clearer all of a sudden. It was a bit like, that's right. It was like the feeling of drawing with a brush. When Luonan first learned how to sketch in Sketch, he first learned how to use composition, lines, light, and shadow to sketch a lifelike image. He felt that he could draw the entire world. Of course, reality would teach him a lesson later on. However, he had just come into contact with a brand new domain. He had a clear feeling of understanding and talent. It was the most beautiful illusion in the world. If he could touch the ground, the feeling would become all the more vivid. Chapter 362. Gym Master Xiao's lecture time was not too long. He indicated that he had already taught Luonan everything that needed to be taught. The rest was up to Luonan to experience. Luonan wasn't in a hurry to leave. He and Shuelei sent off the students of Basic Class 5, then went to the backyard to help Gym Master Xiao clean up. He continued to pack his luggage, and he only left the Daoguan at around 9 o'clock. Luonan and Shuelei separated in the underground parking lot of Boshan Building. They sat in the security car sent by the society. The driver of the car was the same one from last night. His surname seemed to be Qin, but Luonan was unclear about his name. Neither of them were talkative people. They merely nodded at each other as a greeting. Luonan sat in the front passenger seat. His body leaned against the back of the seat, allowing the car to drive onto the highway. He closed his eyes and muttered to himself. Right now Luonan's heart, liver, and spleen were driving the blood and energy of his entire body to rise and fall. The blood and energy soaked through the tendons, periosteum, muscles, and so on of his entire body. The blood and energy rose to his face. The eye's orifice was like a lamp, and the orifice of his mouth and tongue was like a jade pool. The blood and energy naturally coiled. It was marvelous beyond compare. However, Luonan was rarely touched by the various mysterious transformations on his body. At this moment, his mind was filled with the knowledge of the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger. The flashing spiritual light seemed to mix with the dazzling starry sky in the afternoon, sketching out a novel structure before disappearing in the blink of an eye. It was both exciting and frustrating. Stop, stop, stop. Dojo Master Xiao had said that this sort of clairvoyance and judgment technique couldn't be done with empty guesses. They had to start from the real thing. The best way was to have a mutual understanding of the inside and the outside. That was to gain insight into oneself, observe others, gradually familiarize oneself, and find an evaluation principle that was most suitable for one's own logic. This sort of way of speaking faintly conformed with the concept of egoism in formatting theory. It suited Luonan's taste very well, and he didn't dare to be careless. So Luonan decided to dedicate all of his weekend time to seriously practice what he had learned tonight. Because of this, he had to postpone all of his schedule for the next 2 days. The current Luonan had a different status in the society. He had an entire security team by his side. If he were to suddenly change his itinerary, he would need to act as soon as possible to avoid inconveniences and accidents. He immediately contacted He Yuan. There was nothing to hide about this matter. He directly said that he had to rest at home and sort out his recent gains. He Yuan naturally supported this. Luonan simply chatted a few words before hanging up. His mind calmed down a bit, and he began to make simple arrangements for his schedule for the next 2 days. On Saturday, he could hide in his bedroom and continue to familiarize himself with the 9 apertures and 6 roots homework. On the other hand, he could ponder the application of the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger. For the rest of the time, he continued to burn and refine the external neuron to see if there was any progress. If he gained anything during this period, he would split his consciousness and send it to ink to verify it one by one. On Sunday, they would make adjustments according to the specific situation on Saturday. Just like that, these 2 days were filled to the brim and were extremely fulfilling. If everything went smoothly, when he arrived at school next Monday, he could use this opportunity to quietly explore the mysteries of gear. How wonderful! Luonan was very satisfied with his own arrangements. He immediately opened his notebook and made some simple tabulations before making some slight adjustments. After everything was settled, he heaved a sigh of relief and was in a good mood. He took the initiative to smile at the bodyguard driver beside him. "You've worked hard these past few days. I'll stay at home for the next 2 days. I hope everyone can relax." Driver Qin wasn't good with words. He was very steady. Luonan's time at the Daoguan wasn't easy to set. He waited in the underground parking lot for nearly an hour, but he was still calm and collected. He felt more reliable than old Jean of the hidden indigo firm. He just laughed at Luonan's words. He didn't respond. Just as the car was about to return to silence, Luonan's wristband vibrated. Someone was calling. Luonan looked at the caller ID and thought to himself, "This is really strange." Emoya's name was actually displayed on the screen. His older female cousin had gone to Man City for a month. She had gone crazy at the music festival, angering his aunt to the point of jumping like a corpse. Aside from Luonan being hospitalized twice in the middle of the month, which was too frightening for him. There was no news from her for most of the time. Why did she take the initiative to call him today? As soon as the call connected, Emoya bluntly asked, "Do you remember the favor you owe me? Did you know that I blocked a bullet for you?" Luonan nearly blurted it out, but in the end he still asked, "What favor?" "I looked at your call log. September 26th, 7:18 in the afternoon. Do you remember?" "Forget it. In any case, you owe me a lot of favors. I don't care about this time. You just need to remember your promise to repay me. I want to use your house to prepare for the party." Luonan finally struggled out of the brilliant thoughts of the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger. He really did obediently sweep his eyes over the call log. He did his best to recall for a few seconds and finally remembered. The night before he truly comprehended formatting theory, Emoya really did cover for him. Actually, there wasn't much meaning to it. Just the next day, he was brought home by his aunt. Luonan was disinclined to bicker with Emoya over these things. "Yeah, you said it before. I think it was in the middle of October. What time is it now?" "Oh, you stood me up because of the music festival." That's right. Emoya had practically let go of everything for the sake of participating in the Man City Music Festival. She had been gone for an entire month. Naturally, she had missed out on everything. Emoya snorted coldly. "Haven't I arranged it now? I'll tell you that I'll be back around the 5th. There's a celebratory party on the same day. Don't be nervous. This has nothing to do with you. Naturally, my best friend will arrange it. You can vacate your house first." "I haven't been back for almost a month," Luonan grumbled. This was the truth. He had been running back and forth between the hospital and his aunt's house since October. His pharmaceutical equipment had probably already turned to dust. He didn't need pharmaceutical experiments right now, but he needed to properly arrange his grandfather's notes, relevant equipment, raw materials, and so on. Oh right. Octopus already had preliminary results. He was anxiously waiting for the contents of his grandfather's notes. He should give Octopus an explanation. Luonan pushed the boat along with the current. "Okay. I'll find some time to tidy things up. I'll contact you again. No need to smoke. Tomorrow is the weekend. Hurry up and get things done." Luonan nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. "No way. Oh, so direct. Monday. I'll vacate Monday for you." "Monday is the 5th. The 5th is Monday. Are you preparing to have us have a dust removal party? I have very important things to do over the weekend." Luonan bit down on the words "very important" and spat them out. He tried to make Emoya understand the seriousness of the matter. In terms of practicality, it was indeed very serious. He had just given Hiyuin a call. He wanted to cancel all of his travel arrangements for tomorrow. With Secretary He's efficiency, this matter would certainly have already been arranged. Now he wanted to turn around and eat it back. Not to mention his face, how would Hiyuin's authority be guaranteed? As for not following the plan and going out by himself, that was even more serious. It was tantamount to trampling Hiyuin's newly established rules into the ground. But there was no way to let Emoya know about this matter, let alone let her understand. Luonan just felt stifled. Emoya was silent for a moment. She spoke a few seconds later. "Very important? A date?" Luonan groaned. "Sis, I'm not lying to you." Chapter 363. Luonan was a bit startled. He split his attention to look. Finally, he hadn't taken the Universal Commands course for nothing. He was immediately able to discern the meaning of this string of hand gestures. "You can use the B-time slot from tonight to tomorrow before the shift changes." The B-time slot was from 5 to 7:30 in the morning. It was the time between the time Luonan woke up and the time before school. During this period, he had his routine morning classes, morning exercises, and breakfast. Shoferchin's meaning was very clear. He was suggesting that he take advantage of this time to settle the matter. In any case, it was their team that was on duty from night to morning. Changing the mission at the last minute was not a big deal. Luonan's mind stirred. Tomorrow morning was not an option. His aunt's house was in the Nade district in the east. From there to the Riverwu district, He would have to pass through more than half of Xia City. But now they had not even left the River Wu district. If they made a sudden turn, they would arrive in at most 10 minutes. Over at Blue Bay Community, the most important things were pharmaceutical equipment, a portable cooler to store raw materials, and his grandfather's notes. They could be taken with them. As for cleaning up, screw her. Luo Nan changed his tone when his thoughts reached this point. How about this, sis? Let's pick up the pace. I happen to be in the Riverwood district, so there's no need for tomorrow. I'll go and clear the place now. Get your best friend here to take over. I'll give her an hour. That works too. I'll ask them. Luo Nan's train of thought opened up, and his mind became quite nimble. He continued to revise his plan. It's fine if she doesn't come over tonight. I'll change the security door to a secret key mode. I'll send it to you later. You can be the second passer, and everything will be fine. Very good. Emoya gave him a rare compliment. You went to Acumen College. Even though you've been to the hospital a lot, your brain capacity has grown. Is there any explanation here? Scram. Luo Nan hung up the call in a bad mood. He couldn't help feeling a bit awkward. He nodded toward Driver Chin and expressed his thanks. Brother Chin, it's all thanks to you today. Chauffeur Chin smiled and spoke for the first time tonight. Let's go next. Blue Bay Community. It was more or less the same as Luo Nan estimated. The security car only took 10 minutes to drive into the parking lot of Blue Bay Community. Chauffeur Chin abided by his duty as a bodyguard and got out of the car to walk with him. There were not many accidents in the world. At least tonight was normal. 2 minutes later, Luo Nan returned to the small nest he had been away from for over a month. This was the only real estate under his name. It was inherited from his father who had gone missing. The cleaning party that Emoya mentioned was actually an exaggeration. With the AI butler in charge, even though he hadn't been back for more than a month, the house was still clean and tidy. There wasn't even a speck of dust in it. Emoya gave him a call as he was heading upstairs. Her best friend just happened to be unable to make it in time, so she directly used Luo Nan's secret passcode method. In this way, Luo Nan didn't plan on staying here for a long time. He walked straight to the study after entering and took out the 3 most crucial items: the black box on the desk, the portable cooler in the bookcase, and the brown leather notebook hidden in the secret compartment. The Luo Young and 10 years old. Luo of Medicine. By Luo Yi, Luo Chen Chen Luan his 10. From Luo Nan of Dong Luan of Luo sect from Luo Nan. Luo Nan at 10 years old. Young and young even. From Nan of the education. From his. From He Chen Yang the young. Emoya's financial support was one of the most important reasons why he was able to persevere for 5 years. Emoya was right. He owed too many favors. But today's matter could not be considered a favor. Between siblings who didn't need favors. Luo Nan felt disturbed. The most fundamental problem was that he was getting further and further away from a normal family life. Luo Nan sighed and laughed. He wanted to pick up the 2 boxes, but Chauffeur Chin rushed ahead to do it for him. He had a strong physique. Carrying the 2 boxes was like picking up 2 stalks of rice straw. Thank you, Brother Chin. Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed. He had tried to snatch them away twice, so he could only let him. He held the most important brown leather notebook in his hand and placed it next to his own notebook. He looked around the room and covered it with his mental senses. After making sure that he did not miss anything, the 2 went downstairs. They didn't forget to set the door to the passcode mode and sent the electronic passcode to Emoya. Sending the passcode wasn't troublesome. It was done in a matter of minutes. They entered the elevator just in time. Luo Nan let out a long sigh. One matter was finally resolved. No matter what Emoya and her group of friends did, it had nothing to do with him. Chauffeur Chin maintained his silence as the elevator went down. It was a bit awkward to not do anything in this narrow space. Luo Nan flipped through his grandfather's notebook in passing. He looked at the familiar and complex molecular formulas, as well as the neatly scribbled handwriting. He had already crossed the threshold of formatting theory. He had a foundation in the internal refinement technique. His God gear and body gear were coupled and interacted. His soul strength advanced like a hurricane to an uncontrollable degree. His understanding of his mind and body was far from what it used to be. With these things as a foundation, he would look back at this notebook. Even though it was hard to say that he understood it, the level of thinking, the angle, and the methods were much richer. He could more or less understand his grandfather's train of thought. It seemed that the entire notebook talked about how to use molecular targeting drugs to realize the activation of specific nerve cells, to realize their self-growth and differentiation, to build new or strengthen nerve circuits, to influence the development of the body's organs, and to finally form a self-format. But this notebook was just an experimental record. The relevant theoretical basis was scattered and messy. It was impossible to form a complete system, even after many attempts of sorting it out. The most complete theoretical overview was actually just a set of diagrams and words on the title page. Luonan flipped to the title page and saw the neat hand-drawn diagram and the scribbled handwriting. The visualization diagram formed by the tetrahedron, inscribed sphere, and circumscribed sphere had already fused into his soul. As for my heart is a prison, my heart is a furnace. As for the 16 words, my heart is a prison, my heart is a furnace. They were always together with his breathing. He had already reached this step, but Luonan was still far from truly understanding formatting theory. He was still unable to ascertain what kind of image and meaning formatting theory, as well as this set of diagrams and words, would have in the eyes of his grandfather, in the eyes of his mother, and in the eyes of that person. However, he suddenly had a thought in his mind. My current method of viewing the world is already very different from that of an ordinary person. Logically speaking, my grandfather and the others should be the same. At the very least, they should be very close. I didn't have this ability before. Perhaps I should look at the notebook from this angle again? Chapter 364. Sorry. Luonan rushed out in a rush. The metal door sensed a human body and opened to two sides. Driver Chin followed him out, but he still didn't say a word. It was as if nothing had happened. The couple cautiously avoided a certain someone who was suspected to be mentally ill. They took the elevator up. In the end, Luonan was shy. It was hard for him to avoid feeling awkward. He repeated his previous words. Sorry, Brother Chin. I was distracted. Driver Chin continued to smile. It's fine, Mr. Luo. Shall we go back now? Yes, let's go back. Luonan closed the notebook as he spoke. He didn't dare to look at it anymore. Cultivation, gear outsourcing, security threats, and various other matters were all squeezed together. If he were to study more notes, he wouldn't be able to endure it even if he were to be torn into 3 pieces. But when he sat in the car, Luonan was unable to endure the silent atmosphere brewing. All sorts of thoughts came one after another, and some of them were quite reasonable. The gym master taught me about the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger. They can distinguish one's innate talent and temperament. They can resonate with the life sketches. The 9 orifices 6 roots internal refinement technique is a method of tempering one's body. It can form a more realistic self-portrait. Grandfather's notes mostly record targeted drugs that affect the human nervous system. If I don't consider the issue of theoretical control, and purely use it as a reference, perhaps there might be some progress? Oh my God! I can't hold it in anymore. What should I do? Luonan picked up the folded notebook and slapped his forehead. He was vexed and yearning. The emotions bubbled up from the bottom of his heart, wave after wave, making him restless. He wanted to verify his thoughts, but he didn't know where to start. This time, it wasn't because he was at a loss. It was because there were too many places to start. Yes, the light of inspiration in Luonan's mind was like lightning in a thunderstorm. It flickered fiercely in his mind, forming hundreds and thousands of streaks in an instant. They were like golden snakes dancing wildly, whipping at the tip of his heart. The more he thought, the more tormented he felt. Luonan sat in the front passenger seat, using the notebook to press against his head. In the end, he was defeated by the impulse of inspiration. He sucked in a breath of cold air and flipped open his brown notebook. Just as he was about to start scribbling, he still had a bit of rationality left in him. He flipped back to his own notebook and found a blank space. Then he started scribbling furiously. Classification technique, internal refinement technique, mind medicine, life sketches. Some of these related knowledge flowed smoothly, while some only existed in concepts. However, when they were connected, they unknowingly formed a vast and vague network that covered and explained everything. The spiritual light flashed like lightning, but the writing speed was still too slow. Luo Nan's 2 legs were trembling with anxiety. The first line of his handwriting was barely neat, but later on his handwriting was so messy that it was out of shape. Many of his thoughts were simply replaced by simple symbols. Some were even randomly sketched out due to his emotions. Just like this, Luo Nan quickly filled up 3 pages of paper. His mind suddenly went blank, and the tip of the pen was unable to fall down no matter what. Only then did this burst of inspiration come to an abrupt end. Perhaps he had only remembered 50%. No, 30%. Beads of sweat seeped out of Luo Nan's palms, back, and forehead. He didn't care. He just flipped through the few pages that he had recorded from beginning to end. For some things that were too illegible and abstract, he would try to recall, interpret, and then make new notes. He was racing against time and memory. He was competing against the most mysterious and unfathomable of inspirations. He flipped through page after page like this. He made notes and added notes. Soon, he filled up 6 or 7 blank pages. It was more than twice the amount he had recorded from the beginning. Then he flipped through the pages for the 3rd time. This time, the pressure was much lighter. He looked through the full 10 pages once more. The more he read, the more relaxed he became. Very good. He was able to make up for it in time. He confirmed that more than 50% of his thoughts had left behind traces. There were some that were more detailed. Luo Nan's wristband vibrated. At first, Luo Nan simply ignored it. Then Driver Qin coughed lightly to remind him. He shot a glance and his scalp tightened. Hiss. Aunt. Where are you? What time is it? Why aren't you home yet? Mrs. Luo Shuqing's tone was very stifling. She was probably really angry. Luo Nan stared blankly. Right. Where was he? He turned his head to look at the driver's seat. Driver Qin turned on the headlights, indicating that he should look at the sign in front of him. Luo Nan looked at the sign and read, I'm at Rongxing Street. Cough. I'm outside the community. I'll be there soon. Luo Nan only had time to confirm the time now. It would have been better if he didn't look. Once he looked, his face twitched. 23:47. It was almost midnight. Luo Nan was able to confirm that the security car he was in was already parked outside the community. He didn't know how long it had been there. Driver Qin sat quietly in the driver's seat. He maintained his silence until now. This was his usual style. Luo Nan needed to express his gratitude. Otherwise, he would have been disturbed in the process of retracing his inspiration. It would have been impossible for him to record 10 pages of inspirations. Brother Qin. Many thanks. Luo Nan's clumsy tongue revealed itself once more. He was stuck here. He didn't know what he should say for a time. Driver Qin laughed again. He spoke a rare long sentence. There has never been time for cultivation and training, especially when you've just learned a new move. When I first started learning martial arts, I was scratching my head when I learned the skill from my teacher. I hated that I couldn't learn it the next day. When I developed my special ability, there was no need to even mention it. Driver Qin was good at understanding others. Luo Nan's awkwardness eased quite a bit. Besides, he was already at the entrance of the community. He wasn't in a rush to go back. With his current state of mind and his pile of luggage and medicine boxes, it was highly likely that he would be confiscated if he brought them back directly. Luo Nan slowly adjusted his breathing and calmed his state of mind. He casually asked about Driver Qin's situation. It could be considered a chat to relax. Brother Qin also dual cultivates martial arts and special abilities? Driver Qin nodded slightly. I first learned martial arts at Luha Gym. I inexplicably gained special abilities. Later on, my martial arts became more and more impure. I made my master angry. He spoke modestly, but Luo Nan was filled with deep veneration. Luha Gym. So Brother Qin is under Mr. Giant Arms. Mr. Giant Arms, whose arms were thick and solid, gave Luonan an extremely deep impression. His pure fleshly body penetrated through steel. His fist energy was perfect. It was truly inconceivable. Luonan only found out later on that Mr. Giant Arms was a powerhouse in the top 10 of Xia City in terms of fleshly body strength. He was top-notch even in the B rank. Driver Qin held Mr. Giant Arms in high esteem. Mr. Giant Arms is a pure refinement of his fleshly body. His martial arts are pure beyond pure. Not to mention that I have a special ability that distracts my mind. Even my temperament is a bit flat. I'm not really suited for Mr. Giant Arms. I can only learn a little bit of it. Can't special abilities and martial arts mutually promote each other? Driver Qin laughed. My special ability leans heavily toward defense. Mr. Giant Arms pays the most attention to instantaneous explosive power. In the end, there are irreconcilable areas between the two. Luonan grunted. He subconsciously sized up Driver Qin a few times, but he forgot that his mind was currently excited. His soul strength was especially active. He subconsciously clairvoyantly. In an instant, Driver Qin's form seemed to fade away. A group of simple stars were arranged within. They were connected to each other, forming a peculiar image. This was a life sketch. Oh, there was more. Chapter 365. Inside and outside of Chauffeur Qin's concise and abstract life sketches were countless sand-like stars. They flickered in and out of existence, radiating a dim light. Luonan could not help but compare the life sketches he had observed before. This was especially true for Cat Eyes and Zhang Yingying, the targets he had once focused on. Every star they presented was resplendent with radiance. The contrast with the gloomy void was extremely intense. It was like silver-white wax tears dripping down on a black paper. There were even lines connecting them that were hard to distinguish between real and fake. Such a scene was undoubtedly influenced by the visualization diagram. Looking at it alone, it was more like a group of abstract symbols. Only when these sketches were pieced together at a terrifying scale could one's senses no longer be entangled in the details. Only then could a hazy and magnificent scene of the starry sky be formed. Therefore, Luonan called it a sketch. It was a sketch that had just completed the outline of the composition. The details had yet to be carved. As for the star atlas before his eyes, the greatest difference was reflected in the details. Hundreds and thousands of stars were distributed within a certain range. Their luminosity was different, and their star magnitudes were different. Some shone with dazzling light, while others could barely be seen. The limited and clear star atlas became complicated, but it also became vivid at the same time. Even the narrowest area was sketched with fine and believable details. It was like the clear atmosphere of a plateau, far away from the light pollution of a metropolis. It was like the gorgeous night sky. Luonan nearly forgot that this was just the body and soul frame of an ability user. The current Luonan was no longer like when he first sketched out his life sketches. He was gesticulating with his hands, but he had been staring at Chauffeur Qin for far too long. Even with Chauffeur Qin's calm nature, he could not help but cough in warning. Oh, sorry. Luonan had repeated this word at least 3 times tonight. Luckily, Chauffeur Qin did not mind. He returned to his habitual silence and just responded with a smile. Luonan could not understand why his clairvoyance and depiction of his life sketches suddenly had so many details. However, he knew that he should get off the car and go home. Luonan tactfully declined Chauffeur Qin's good intentions and got off the car. He took out 2 boxes from the trunk of the car. The notebook was tucked under his left elbow. It was a bit uncomfortable, but he could still walk. He bid farewell to Chauffeur Qin and went straight home. There was no one else under the street lamps as he walked along the community road. This environment was very suitable for his thoughts to fly. And Luonan's brain power unconsciously began to surge. Why was he interested in Driver Qin? It was because this person's words vaguely resonated with Gym Master Xiu's root receptacle, root nature and root trigger division. The awakened extraordinary power could be understood as the root receptacle. The problem of personality was in the category of the root receptacle. As for taking a different path from Mr. Giant Arm, It was the problem of the root receptacle. That was the principle. According to Gym Master Xiu's teachings, one had to find the corresponding starting point. When he was listening to the lecture, his sense of direction was still very vague. However, after a round of inspiration on the road and the observation of driver Qin, the situation changed subtly. Luo Nan suppressed the urge to turn around and look for her. He regulated his breathing and let his feverish brain cool down a bit. He first went to the detached garage outside his aunt's main house. This was a more common three-dimensional garage for the middle class in the city. It was divided into 2 levels, and the 2 cars at home were placed separately. When in use, the converter could be activated to change the number of levels, and the car needed could be taken to the exit. The space was relatively narrow, and the function was also simple, so it couldn't be used to store junk. However, at the back of the garage, at the edge of the courtyard, there was a wooden door installed in the lawn. When the door opened, there was a staircase leading to the space at the bottom level. This was an underground storage room. It was said that Emoya had hidden it from her family during her Chinibu period. She spent over a year to dig it up by herself. Unfortunately, she had to pay a considerable fine to the community after her secret was leaked. Emoya, who was in her Chinibu period, was a standard female hipster. She treated this place as a tree hollow type of private space. Later, as she grew older, she stopped playing this game. She gave this place to Luo Nan, letting him store a few sensitive items. Luo Nan had been home for 4 or 5 years. He had been able to manufacture drugs independently, and he had been able to hide it from his aunt and uncle. This storage room was a great contribution. This was a favor. So he had to lower his head to Emoya. Luo Nan placed the box into the secret compartment of the storage room. He turned around and wanted to leave, but his thoughts stirred. He placed the 2 notebooks under his elbows into the secret compartment as well. The reason why Luo Nan didn't place 1 notebook, but 2 was because Luo Nan was worried that he wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if he really took the notebooks filled with the imprints of inspiration back to his room. The good work and rest rhythm he had established during this period of time would be utterly destroyed. It wasn't easy to make this decision. Luo Nan looked back 3 times with every step he took. Only when he reached the surface and closed the trapdoor did he let out a long sigh of relief. He walked back into the room and welcomed his aunt's reprimand. Though variables occurred one after another, and he would be reprimanded when he returned home, Luo Nan had a rather fulfilling night. He hardened his heart and placed the notebooks in the underground storage room. It had some effects. It helped Luo Nan strictly follow the requirements of the meridian art set down by Gym Master Xiu. He raised and lowered his energy and blood, burned and refined his essence before going to sleep. This continued until his internal organs, limbs, and bones were parallel inside and out. Layer by layer, they operated and transformed in harmony with his 9 orifices and 6 roots. As a result, the amount of homework he did this night was several times more than when he only cultivated the eye's orifice. A large chunk of time was cut out just like that. It was already 4 in the morning by the time he awoke from his meditative state. Morning classes were about to begin. If this situation continued in the future, he probably wouldn't need to sleep. Luo Nan smacked his lips. The feeling of opening a new orifice was still clear. Right now, his mouth and tongue were producing saliva. It was sweet and cool. It was completely different from the dry, astringent, and smelly taste he usually had in the morning. Naturally, he swallowed the saliva. There was still an unending stream of it. Moving his lips and tongue made things a lot more convenient. Unfortunately, his mouth wasn't as clumsy as it was in the past. In the end, it was due to his mentality and personality. It was a waste of this newly developed talent. He experienced this small change in his mouth and tongue when he first learned it last night. Right now, it could only be said that he didn't need to rinse his mouth. It wasn't too much of a surprise. Luo Nan was still looking forward to the truly wonderful part. Today was Saturday, November 3rd, 2096. It was the designated time for Luo Nan to go into closed-door cultivation. Perhaps this was compensation. These days were the SCA's routine statistics period at the beginning of the month. His uncle was a high-ranking employee, a technical expert, and needed to be present to supervise. His aunt was a senior HR employee of a large company, She just happened to run into a new department hiring. She saw the high overtime pay, so she didn't have time to stay home. She just so happened to give Luo Nan a stress-free, interference-free environment. Luo Nan returned from his morning practice and was in a great mood after learning this news. His appetite seemed to have grown quite a bit, but he was still far too naive. Mo Peng, who was supposed to be sleeping in as he usually did on the weekends, came scampering downstairs at 7 o'clock. His round and fat body brought along an ominous wind. He saw that his parents weren't paying attention to him for the time being. He bluntly asked, Chapter 366. Without a doubt, Mo Peng was talking about the amusement plan of the Frost River Reality Cloud City Water Village store. This scoundrel was unable to move the moment he heard about virtual reality games. Not to mention the support of beautiful women. He seemed to be pestering Luo Nan endlessly. Luo Nan really did not have the energy to argue with him. He could only use delaying tactics. The students will all go home on the weekends. Who would go to the large living area to hold a party? Yet then next Monday. Hey, are you urging me to skip class? Mo Peng had the heroic feeling of risking his life to accompany Luo Nan on the surface, but he had the wretchedness of shifting the blame to someone else. Luo Nan went directly to the dining room. He used his aunt and uncle as a shield to escape from Mo Peng's pestering. Mo Peng hurried from behind. Next Monday. Next Monday. It's a deal. Luo Nan responded carelessly, but he could not hold back his evil thoughts. If you talk any more nonsense, I'll call Zhang Yingying over and have that sister properly fix you up. They finally made it through breakfast. Mo Peng was someone who could not stay idle. Other than sleeping in on the weekends, he had a rich and colorful life. He was the first to go out. Then his aunt and uncle left one after the other. Of course, his aunt could not avoid giving him instructions. She even set up the operating mode of the AI housekeeper. It made Luo Nan feel that he was infinitely close to being a mama's baby. Who said this? Damn, it was that bastard Mo Peng. Were those two siblings sent by the heavens to torment me? Luo Nan rolled his eyes. He tidied up the bowls and chopsticks, patiently cleaning the dining room and the kitchen. During this time, the so-called native species gene and ecological maintenance business began a new day of docking. Peony led Inc. and met up with Trigate Security's operation team. They began another on-site meeting. Today their plan was to study the Forest Wall district. Tomorrow, they would study the Riverwu district. If everything went smoothly, Luo Nan could slack off for the next 2 days. He could spare some time and energy to ponder and verify his latest findings. I'm finally on the right track. Luo Nan let out a long sigh. He went to the underground storage room next to the garage and retrieved 2 notebooks. Then he went into his bedroom, determined not to come out for a day. Luo Nan sat cross-legged on the bed in his bedroom. He flipped through the pages filled with countless inspirations. He had only taken a few glances when his blood boiled with emotions. It was as if a fire had been lit in a well that was overflowing with oil. It burned with a rumble once more. Luo Nan took a deep breath. He knew that it would be very hard for him to truly sink his heart into contemplation if he didn't control his emotions. However, he had already suppressed it for an entire night. He wished that he could tackle this problem even in his dreams. Suppressing it again was easier said than done. It's better to disperse than to block. Luo Nan muttered a few words and his mouth cracked open. His surging soul strength was like a flood from a broken dam, flowing in all directions within his blossoming smile. The sky outside the house was clear and bright, but when the image was projected into the Heart Lake, it instantly turned gloomy and dark. The hazy starry sky unfolded in Luo Nan's heart, covering an area of several dozen square kilometers. The life sketches of the thousands of households in the community, and the tens of thousands of living beings were reflected one by one. As the living starry sky appeared, the suppressed heart fire spread throughout the starry sky. Soon, the heat dissipated, leaving only a little life fluctuation that resonated with the stars in the sky. Luo Nan's mind unconsciously became clear and transparent. He was in the clearest state. He was not in a meditative state, but he seemed to be in a meditative state. He sensed the interference and resonance between himself and the lives of others, and a direction of action naturally jumped out. He didn't get tangled up. He took advantage of the situation and the center of the vast star river. The visualization diagram that belonged solely to him naturally appeared. The structure of the tetrahedron, the inscribed sphere, and the outer scribed sphere corresponded with the tens of thousands of life sketches. They converged together. The long river of starlight flowed over the format pyramid. It seemed to completely submerge it, and a clear hierarchy appeared within the format pyramid. It was orderly and not chaotic in the slightest. Ever since that night at Frost River Reality, Luonan's format pyramid had already merged with the star river converged by the life sketches. However, it was also relatively independent. It seemed to act according to its own rules. Only when the domains clashed would the format pyramid's dominance become clear. But this time, the towering and unmoving format pyramid seemed to undergo a subtle change under the radiance of the tens of thousands of stars. There should be a change. Luonan spoke to himself in his mind. His way of thinking had undergone a substantial change under the assault of countless rays of light and fire. The format pyramid, the foundation of his body and soul, had to undergo a corresponding change in order to prove that it was real. Luonan's telepathic light shone from above, probing the visualization diagram inside and out. What was originally a fuzzy feeling turned into a clear understanding. The format pyramid of the past was a simple combination of geometric figures. It could be considered a conceptual expression. But now this group of figures had a few more details. Points, lines, and planes were joined together, revealing the conformation of light and shadow, and an even more marvelous texture. Similar details continued to increase, so much so that the concise conceptual diagram was a bit unsuitable. After all, a concept was a concept. The corresponding idealized diagram was far too rigid. Luonan's thoughts stirred, and the visualization diagram, which was stuffed with rich details, was like a sandcastle piled up by the seashore. It collapsed in such a manner, scattering countless streams of silver-white light into the void. Holy crap! Luonan's mind instinctively tightened. But before his nervous emotions could surge, his clairvoyance mind was filled with thousands of stars of varying brightness and darkness. That's right. The conceptual combination of points, lines, and planes suddenly transformed into thousands of stars. They were arranged and spread out, transforming into a group of resplendent constellations. They mutually referred to their corresponding structures. Looking at them as a whole, there were still traces of the rules of a tetrahedron, an inscribed sphere, and an outer scribed sphere. Luonan stared blankly for a moment. His visualization diagram changed from a conceptual geometric figure to a more substantial star arrangement and constellation structure. Wasn't this a life sketch? This sort of situation was very similar to the situation when he used clairvoyance with Driver Chin yesterday. Luonan wanted to bite his finger. His mind was filled with confusion, absent-mindedness, and excitement. The construction of his self-created life sketch had completely blasted apart the barrier of laws between the format pyramid and the living starry sky. It was like an exquisite mathematical transformation. The two unrelated domains were drawn under the same rule, expanding and enriching its contents a step further. Countless details that could be researched were added. From this point of view, his attempts had just begun, but he had already made an exciting breakthrough. But on the other hand, the dissimulation and decomposition of his visualization diagram had accompanied him for many years. The impact was real, so much so that he had to mentally prepare himself. Well, for example, the constellations in the sky. They were never diagrams of light connected to lines. Instead, they were the outlines of the human imagination. They were the reflections of a specific culture. They were the products of a high degree of representation. Perhaps this reasoning could be applied to the format pyramid? Luonan was suddenly stupefied. A certain question emerged from nothing, invading his thoughts. Was the object of his grandfather's formatting theory research back in the day an abstract concept? Or was it a concrete phenomenon? He chose the latter. It was impossible for purely abstract and generalized symbols to develop rich connotations without concrete and detailed phenomena to support them. Even if they did, it would be a dreamlike fantasy. In other words, Luonan picked up the brown notebook in his hand and flipped to the title page. He stared directly at the concise lines of the diagram, but what appeared before his eyes was clearly the deep and vast starry sky. Chapter 367. The starry sky on the title page was obviously just an illusion, but the changes in the format pyramid were real. Luonan couldn't sit still on the bed. He got up and circled around the bed. He had an intense premonition. He had studied formatting theory for over 5 years. Perhaps it was only now that he truly touched upon the threshold of his grandfather's core research. What should I do next? What should I do next? Luonan's mind was originally quite clear. He had made preparations for today's closed-door training to tackle difficult problems. But he never expected that his beginning would go so smoothly. It went so smoothly that he lost control. After the format pyramid transformed into a star atlas, all of his previous plans were completely nullified. He needed to sort out a general train of thought based on his new structure. But the true problem was that it wasn't that he had too few ideas. It was that he had too many. He threw himself onto the bed and picked up his split-page notebook. He wrote and drew in a venting manner. Soon another 6 or 7 blank pages were filled with words, diagrams and symbols. And there were still endless impulses that tried to jump out from his brain. Luonan never thought that he would be stuffed to death by inspiration one day. It was already 11:30 by the time he recovered from his work of memorizing inspiration. The AI butler followed the design program and made lunch. It invited the only diner in the house to the table. Luonan had been evaporating his brain power for the entire morning. His consumption was extraordinary. His instincts began to alarm him. He simply picked up his notebook and went downstairs. He was prepared to continue pondering and writing during his meal. He would not waste time. Luonan absent-mindedly ate a few mouthfuls of food, but he wrote and drew half a page of words and symbols. He didn't feel that there was anything wrong with this. He could even continue doing this at the dining table. Another preset reminder came at this time. It's time for the afternoon class. Sweat it out, young man. The hexa-ear vibrated. Shui Lei's thick voice was mixed with stifled laughter. It was exceptionally comical. This was a reminder he had recorded a few days ago, when he had nothing better to do. It was specifically set up to control his work and rest time. Gym Master Xiu's teachings were intrinsically very rigorous. He paid the most attention to habits and tempo. He believed that good cultivation habits and efficient tempo were the foundation for achieving martial accomplishments. This was especially true after Luonan achieved success in the heart lantern of the eye's orifice. The demands on his side were even higher. Aside from unavoidable circumstances or extremely special circumstances, Luonan's morning classes, evening classes, and afternoon classes were all unshakable. Luonan couldn't be lazy. Shui Lei was a good friend, and at the same time, he was the most serious and inflexible supervisor. After over a dozen days of strict control, Luonan had already formed an initial cultivation rhythm under the external supervision and internal urging. And because of the true feedback from the internal refinement technique, he would be a bit unaccustomed to messing up his rhythm. Luonan looked at his watch and struggled a few times in his mind. In the end, he closed his eyes and pushed his notebook to the side. He sped up his eating speed. The benefits of coming in contact with the mouth and tongue acupoint yesterday were also evident. His digestive tract's ability to decompose water grains and transform essence qi had improved significantly. Luonan vaguely felt that what he was eating wasn't a tasteless, nutritious meal. Instead, it was strands of essence energy that seeped into his body. The essence energy endlessly circulated throughout his body as he ate, making up for his lack of energy. The progress is excellent, and the vital energy in the 5 viscera is stable. There's no obvious imbalance. According to Gym Master Xiu's words, the root receptacle is thick and the foundation is firm. It's enough to bear. Hiss. Luonan suddenly realized something. He nearly stabbed his chopsticks into his nostrils as he subconsciously ate his food. He couldn't care less about his sorry state. His mind spun. The progress of the body gear is under Gym Master Xiu's control. Although it's still weaker than the god gear, it's solid with every step. The so-called body is like a mountain, densely planted with thick soil. It's not bad at all. In comparison, the god gear driven by formatting theory is advancing like a hurricane. The growth is out of control, and it's already quite troublesome. If I were to be urged by a flash of inspiration and erupt a second time, would I still want this little life of mine? Luo Nan's back was drenched in sweat when he thought of this. He flipped through his notebook once more, and he immediately crossed out all the radical and bold plans. Then he searched for the relatively conservative plans that advanced step by step, and carefully pondered over them. That's right. My root receptacle isn't thick in the research of formatting theory. My root nature is unclear, and my root trigger is advanced. I need to carefully sculpt and solidify my foundation before I make any plans. In this way, the idea of turning sketch into sketch is quite appropriate. Luo Nan slapped the table and made up his mind. He poured the food into his mouth in a few mouthfuls, tidied up a bit, and went upstairs for his afternoon class. Luo Nan performed a round of cultivation. The vital energy of his 5 viscera circulated, and the light trembled of his muscles, skin, and flesh. Luo Nan very naturally captured a moment of calmness. He took advantage of this moment to switch to clairvoyance towards the living starry sky. He began his afternoon research. Compared to the flashes of inspiration and the successive bursts of intensity in the morning, his mind was set in the afternoon. His state of mind was much calmer. He just quietly observed this marvelous and gorgeous starry sky. However, he didn't use the logic of formatting theory. Instead, he used the eyes of a painter. Luo Nan had first pondered over the drawing method of life sketches. It was a time of great danger. The argument was made in haste, and time was tight. He exhausted all of his accumulated knowledge at the time. The out-of-body experience, the pattern and rhythm of soul breathing, the understanding of configuration, the operational structure of energy and information. This included his many years of sketching skills, his experience in drawing thousands upon thousands of sketches, and his keen grasp of a character's characteristics. Luo Nan was able to integrate super complex elements to complete such a magnificent masterpiece. It was enough to be proud of. But from the harshest point of view, there was always a difference in judging standards between a rushed work and a meticulous work. In the end, a life sketch was just a sketch. It was a rough impression captured through the use of sketching techniques. Composition, proportion, structure, and all sorts of details were far from perfect. Needless to say, Luo Nan was still lacking far too much at the time. He didn't have the ability to bear the burden. He didn't have the insight and experience. But now, through learning from Gym Master Xiao, cramming in the basic knowledge of the inner world, and practicing the coupling effects of the god gear and the body gear, Luo Nan patched up one flaw after another. He was like a young painter who had achieved minor success in his craft. Luo Nan turned his head and looked at the draft he first practiced with. It was too horrible to look at, but he knew where the flaws were and how to fix them. The overall order of the living starry sky existed, but the precision of the diagram was lacking. The image was large and impractical. It had already formed a basic mold, but there was practically no room for refinement. If Luo Nan wanted to fix it, he would have to transform the star atlas into the format pyramid, and the star atlas into reality. These were his directions. Luo Nan slowly adjusted his breathing. The starry sky pieced together from the life sketches was like a newly completed composition. A draft of the structure was just waiting for him to use the tip of his brush to outline even more exquisite layers of light and shade, to reveal even more crucial details. Chapter 368. Luo Nan decided on a preliminary direction, but he wasn't in a hurry to get started. Just like a qualified painter, Luo Nan would never hastily put his brush to work. What he faced was not a blank piece of paper, but a deep and complex starry sky. He flipped through the split-page notebook in his hand, found a blank page, and wrote solemnly with a pen. The first rule begins with me. Push yourself to others. Looking at the current situation, the easiest and smoothest choice to correct the life sketch was external clairvoyance. Driver Qin was a good example. At that level, The answer was already laid out before his eyes. But Luo Nan was fully aware that this was not enough. Without the link of self-reference, it would be hard to estimate what kind of flaws would exist in the work. The first version of the life sketch was limited by Luo Nan's level of understanding at the time. It practically lost the space for further refinement. Luo Nan needed to take this as a warning. But it must be known that self-reflection had always been a difficult part of cultivation. It was said that the most important thing was to know one's self. Gym Master Xiao had emphasized this last night with similar words, and Luo Nan had said early on that he wasn't good at self-portraits. These were not words of modesty. Of course, looking at it from another angle, high consumption often represented high returns. Although this method was difficult, it was a process of defining principles and standards. Only by polishing oneself would one be able to reflect external objects more clearly. The essence of the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger subdivision techniques taught by Gym Master Xiao were here. Luo Nan chose a path that was difficult at first, then easy at the end. He needed to climb the steepest peak. Only in this way could he solidify his foundation and avoid the fatal danger of formatting theory's uncontrollable growth. Luo Nan paused for a moment, then wrote another line. The second rule. Observation comes first. Multidimensional reproduction. Luo Nan used his drawing techniques to take a picture of the living starry sky. Whether it was sketching or sketching, neither was a skill that relied on imagination. He needed to have a real object of observation. There was nothing much to say. Luo Nan's object of observation was himself. This was not a simple drawing in a mirror. Instead, he needed to probe the frame of body and soul. He needed to take the form and the soul. And he needed to correspond with the form of the star atlas. Most of the various elements involved the mental plane. Thoughts were chaotic, and it was easier said than done to seek them. Perhaps he could only use the God wheel, body wheel, visualization diagram, root receptacle, root nature, root trigger, and other levels of reference to find the greatest common divisor. This would undoubtedly increase Luo Nan's workload. But since he had already given up the easy and chosen the most dangerous path, he didn't mind adding a few more burdens. Luo Nan had some thoughts in his mind after he finished writing these 2 lines. They seemed to be clear, but they weren't. It was hard for them to be fully expressed. He subconsciously twirled his pen, and his other hand lifted up the slightly yellow pages that were smeared with sweat. Luo Nan's gaze streaked across the pages of the notebook one by one. He once again swept his eyes over the dozen or so records of inspiration that contained an enormous amount of information. A moment later, he casually flipped through his previous handwriting. This included a limited number of paintings on paper. If he didn't include the records of his inspirations, although his notebook was thick, there weren't many meaningful things in it. Among them, the most valuable should be the 2 psychic diagrams. The other one was slightly smaller. It was the outline of the wraith sign that he had drawn at school. It was more abstract. As for the other one, even though it had been painted into a mess by the glitter pen, the overall structure and the relevant details were much more specific, but there were also rich symbolic meanings. Yes, that was the prison sketch. It was the diagram that Luo Nan drew when he was imprisoned in the confinement room on ship Lanshan, under the catalysis of inspiration. He comprehended the profoundness of my heart's a prison from this, truly obtaining extraordinary power. My heart's a prison? Luo Nan's mind suddenly stirred, and his dark thoughts suddenly brightened. Since he was going to revise it, how could he skip over these important points? He immediately moved his pen, forming words on the previous page. Third principle, concreteness. Crucial links. The 3 principles on the paper were arranged in order, and the scope of their expressions shrunk one by one. By the time he reached the 3rd principle, he had touched upon the substantive level. He could begin to work on it. My heart's a prison had a special role in Luo Nan's formatting theory research process. If Luo Nan really wanted to make a move, choosing this node was quite suitable. After experiencing the impact and sharpening of many events, Luo Nan now had a relatively clear concept in his heart. My heart's a prison, including formatting theory itself, was essentially the materialization of some sort of compelling rule. It was just like what he sensed from the depths of the mental plane during the incident at Frost River Reality. It was an inconceivable order frame. It was internalized into the structure of a person's body and soul to achieve the final result. Luo Nan found a more appropriate explanation of Eastern metaphysics during the time he was learning from Gym Master Xiao. One with the world. There was a similar statement in the classical scriptures. It was said, "Man follows the earth follows the heaven follows the Tao, and the Tao follows nature." All right, he had to admit that the words of Eastern metaphysics were far too rich in meaning. There were often many interpretations. It was very likely that he would be led into a ditch if he were to chew on the words one by one. He simply used this kind of imagery to draw a classical visualization diagram on his notebook. It was a combination of a tetrahedron, an inscribed sphere, and an outer scribed sphere. The inscribed sphere symbolized the self format, the outer scribed sphere symbolized the heaven and earth format, and the tetrahedron in the middle represented the societal format. From the perspective of a pure cultivator, he could temporarily discard the societal format. He could pay more attention to the relationship between the self format and the heaven and earth format. However, this topic itself was far too large. It didn't conform to the principle of concreteness. Luo Nan simply discarded it. He no longer considered the overall framework. He only sculpted the details. In other words, he gave up on the large topic of how to create the heaven and earth format. He chose the following branch: how to manifest the creation of the heaven and earth format with the self format. It seemed to be too large. Then he continued to choose. As he went down the levels, Luo Nan's mind became clearer and clearer. The basis for his choice became clearer and clearer. He didn't even need to think about things like fundamental theories. Right now, he had yet to reach the level of explaining phenomena and forming theories. Discovering problems, observing phenomena, collecting data, and then summarizing basic logic was everything he could do for now and for a period of time to come. If he were to start from the basic phenomena, there was a fact that was very clear. What was Luo Nan's most substantial gain after comprehending, "My heart's a prison"? A low crashing sound rang in the quiet bedroom. The answer was the heavily chained crow. This inconceivable materialized image had helped Luo Nan's soul leave his body. It had subdued the human-faced arachnid's avatar. It had accumulated his first bucket of gold. It had also grabbed Luo Nan and set him on the fast track of uncontrollable development. In that case, why would there be? Oh, let's give up on the why. Right now Luo Nan just wanted to know what sort of shape the heavily chained crow would take after he pulled it out of the format pyramid after the Star Atlas transformation. What sort of changes would occur? This was the first lesson of his observations. Chapter 369. The trembling of the chains spread out on the mental plane, continuing without end. But Luo Nan waited and waited, and the familiar dark chains remained hidden in the core of the living starry sky. Fragments of structure flickered faintly, but Luo Nan was unable to see its concrete form. It can't be that after the Star Atlas transformation, all my previous achievements have been reset to zero, right? It was hard for Luo Nan's imagination to run wild when he encountered an unexpected situation. He attempted to enter a deeper level of clairvoyance within the format pyramid Star Atlas, but just as his thoughts stirred, some structure seemed to melt away in the outermost region of the format pyramid. It's the circumscribed circle. The blurry spherical silhouette representing the heaven and earth format was like an inflating bubble. It rapidly expanded until it reached its limit, and then it shattered. The stars flickered as it transformed into the vaster depths of the starry sky. Luo Nan did not know what this phenomenon represented. At the very least, his frame of body and soul, his god gear, and his body gear did not show any adverse reactions. Before his thoughts settled, another layer of structure melted away. It was the tetrahedron representing the social format. The situation was similar to that of the circumscribed circle. The corresponding stars shifted and spread, silently merging into the living starry sky. The two outer layers of structure peeled away and melted away, forming two waves of dazzling fireworks in the living starry sky. They dazzled the eyes for a moment, but they disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Luo Nan's scalp went numb. If the self-format did this again, His frame of body and soul might not be able to hold on, and his mental defenses might collapse first. What he feared had come. The only remaining spherical star atlas silhouette in the core region was like a deformed heart amidst Luo Nan's turbulent state of mind. It suddenly expanded and contracted along with Luo Nan's breathing and heartbeat. Then it expanded and contracted again. Luo Nan's attention was practically drawn to this peculiar movement pattern after 5 or 6 consecutive rounds of expansion and contraction. But it was only practically. Luo Nan paid attention to the outline of the self-format from beginning to end. He watched helplessly as it expanded and contracted, beginning to expand inconceivably in this pattern. After a few rounds of expansion and contraction, the spherical star atlas had already expanded 3 to 4 times its original size. But its density did not decrease because of the expansion. On the contrary, more and more stars appeared at the very core, gradually forming a dense cluster of stars like a silver sphere. At this point, the format of the tetrahedron, the inscribed circle, and the circumscribed sphere had already become history. Only this brilliant cluster of stars remained. It was like the core of a galaxy formed from billions of stars in the true universe. It sat at the very center of the living starry sky. It's good that it didn't collapse. Luo Nan sought joy in the midst of bitterness. He was just about to go and observe these changes in greater detail when the sound of chains, which he had nearly forgotten, rang out once more from the depths of the brilliant and splendid constellation. It carried a special rhythm that covered every corner of his range of perception. At the same time, an invisible and boundless power accompanied it, spreading throughout the starry sky, distorting the darkness in all directions. The stars in the sky and the millions of life sketches circled around it. Luo Nan was able to clearly sense some sort of obscure law using this incorporeal, yet boundless power as a carrier. It was laid out layer by layer, invading practically every single life sketch. A headache and dizziness were Luo Nan's first reactions. This was because the first thing that was impacted by this rule was his general knowledge of the basic spatial order around him. The living starry sky was distorted. The near became far, and the far became near. It was originally at the top, but it suddenly fell to the bottom. The corresponding understanding was completely destroyed. It couldn't go on like this. If a painter could not even understand the most basic concept of space, then his painting would basically be meaningless. Luo Nan hoped to restore his cognitive order. He deeply sensed the living starry sky, using interference power to borrow the material plane to anchor his position anew. For this reason, the God gear and body gear interlocked and rotated. The spiritual light of the eye's orifice transformed into a heart lantern. It drove the energy of his internal organs, and it cast itself towards the boundless starry sky of the mental plane. The results of clairvoyance became more and more subtle. The boundless Milky Way had hundreds and thousands of constellations. They naturally resonated with the heart lantern of the eye's orifice, but they were all different. Some were dim and lightless, while others became especially eye-catching. Whether they were bright or dark had nothing to do with the distance between them in physical space. It was even more chaotic. Luo Nan was already riding a tiger, unable to back down. He could only continue clairvoyance. The heart lantern transformed into a beam of sensing light, making contact with the glittering targets one by one. In an instant, the warped distance of physical space became meaningless. The heart lantern of the eye's orifice was like a beam of light that descended from the heavens. It pierced into the more practical world of reality from the mental plane. Darkness assaulted Luo Nan's face, but it was pierced through in the blink of an eye. The barrier between the material plane and the mental plane was already weak and powerless before Luo Nan. Under the illumination of the heart lantern, the light and shadow of reality interweaved and combined, reflecting a fuzzy figure that gradually grew clearer. And so Luo Nan saw a majestic black man. His upper body was bare, and he quietly sat cross-legged in a secret room. He was like a statue. His pitch-black skin was covered in a layer of dense beads of sweat, and the distinct lines of his fascia and muscles were trembling. It was clear that he was not as tranquil as he appeared on the surface. Luo Nan recognized this person. He was Black Tiger Bays. He was the vice commander of the Knights of Equity of the Order of Justice of Xia City. He was an expert with an extraordinarily powerful fleshly talent. During the incident at Frost River Reality, this fellow was a fierce general under An Wang. He was an enemy of Luo Nan's side, and he fought brilliantly against the ears of Truth Fairchild. But in the end, he was used as a sacrifice by An Wang to release the power of the scales of truth. During the sacrifice, the element of chaos was replaced, causing Bei's foundation to be nearly completely destroyed. In the end, Fairchild, who cherished talent, saved him. Fairchild then requested Luo Nan to lend a helping hand, entering the order frame to maintain his livelihood. Bei relied on Luo Nan's order frame to survive. In this sense, Bei was also one of Luo Nan's believers. But Luo Nan did not have the power to control this wild and unruly fellow. He had no interest in ordering him around. Many times he nearly forgot about Bei. Luo Nan never expected that his subconscious clairvoyance would select this person. With Luo Nan's current eyesight and knowledge, coupled with the close relationship between the two, the heart lantern of the eye's orifice descended upon Bei's most essential location. His muscles and bones were strong, but his internal organs were weak. His vital energy was scattered. His human frame had collapsed. Only by following the order frame bestowed upon him could he survive. Bei was still in the recovery period. Even though Luo Nan had given him the support of the order frame, Luo Nan only understood half of it at the time. There were many areas where the information was fuzzy. The relevant adjustments and adaptations were a large project. Luo Nan could feel Bei's hardships and impatience, but there was even more tenacity and callousness. Perhaps Bei had paid attention to the heart lantern of the eye's orifice for too long, but Bei seemed to sense something. His eyelids trembled slightly, and he immediately opened them. Luo Nan could see that Bei's thick lips were slightly curled up. There was a bit of ridicule in his eyes, but it was unknown which side he was referring to. In the next moment, Bei raised his arms and raised his head. He assumed a strange pious posture, as if he wanted to embrace the holiness of the void. Chapter 370. Oh, this wild and unruly fellow. Luo Nan didn't go so far as to consider himself a god. He wouldn't lose his bearings just because of a few words from Bei. The light of the heart lantern of the eye's orifice pointed directly at Bei's essence. Luo Nan naturally used the division technique he had just learned from Gym Master Xiao. Yes, there was also the relevant information that Fairchild had told him before he left. Luo Nan had a general judgment of Bei. This fellow pursued power without end. There was only power in his eyes. He didn't care about being restricted at all, especially when it came to the so-called gods, doctrines, and other illusory matters. The root receptacle could be remolded. The root nature could be controlled. The root trigger was appropriate. It seemed like it could be done. What Luo Nan lacked the most right now was observation and verification. His thoughts spun in a circle, and the beam of light from the heart lantern of the eye's orifice dropped down, piercing between Bei's eyebrows. It was at this moment that Luo Nan realized with horror that the sound of chains under the living starry sky grew clearer. The incorporeal and boundless power merged with the beam of light from the heart lantern of the eye's orifice. It ignored the distance between space and itself as it pierced into Bei's body. The interference power of the heart lantern was not worth mentioning in front of a powerful B rank. However, the marvelous power of distortion it carried was instantly displayed on Bei's body. Bei's reaction was huge. His cheeks contorted, and the muscles of his body violently twitched. Even so, Bei opened his mouth to reveal an ugly and unbridled smile. Bang! The hard bed beneath Bei inexplicably split open. Dust flew everywhere. He stood up and landed on the ground. He staggered a bit, but he still maintained a posture of stretching out his arms and raising his head. He looked more like a fanatic than anyone else. In reality, this fellow was just excited. He only believed in power that belonged to him. Bei's foundation had been corroded by the chaos element, and he had been repeatedly tortured by the half-baked rule that Luo Nan had given him. He was at the weakest point of his life. His internal organs, muscles, bones, skin, and flesh were only in shape. His functions were scattered. But under the illumination of the heart lantern of the eye's orifice, the marvelous power of distortion of the living starry sky poured in. The power of distortion represented some sort of hidden and powerful rule of order. Baze didn't lack anything. He just lacked a power of order that could integrate the functions of his chaotic body. So he celebrated the internalization of the rule. The rule itself was a set of chains and fences that were difficult to break free from. As long as there was power, anything was possible. To others, this sort of order and rules was a prison, but to Baze it was the toughest backbone. It was the foundation and guarantee that he could achieve his goals. Baze staggered 2 or 3 steps before he managed to steady himself. His eyes were ferocious and glowed with a green light. After holding back for more than 20 days, this guy was like a hungry beast, looking for food in the wilderness. His hunting ground was the big city outside. In the next moment, the iron door of the quiet room, along with the door frame, was kicked off the wall and flipped over. The members of the Order of Justice, who were responsible for taking care of him and monitoring him in passing, were all dumbstruck. Baze strode forward and raised his hands high at the same time. He shouted at the ceiling, or at the higher realms, in a pious and crazed manner. "Praise you!" Evidently, he was quite satisfied with the formless yet powerful rules of order. He felt that the power he had gathered at his current stage was worth the price he paid. The Order of Justice of Xia City was undoubtedly at its weakest right now. After Baze reconstructed the frame of his soul, he recovered most of his strength to its peak state. Even First Ablatum Zhengxiao, who was temporarily in charge of the Order of Justice, didn't have the guts to stop him. He could only let Baze swagger away. It seemed like he had done something wrong. Luonan watched Baze laugh loudly as he walked out. He felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. He shook his head, leaving a portion of his mind as a precaution. Then he continued his journey of clairvoyance with the heart's lantern. In the end, a weirdo like Baze was just an exception. The sky gradually darkened, and the night world of Xia City was rapidly recovering its vitality. In a dimly lit alleyway, a drunk woman was yelling in a language that no one could understand. She tore off her denim jacket and covered her forehead with it. She tried to block the invisible beam of light, to block the binding that came at the same time that terrified her even more. Of course, everything was futile. The drunk woman cursed loudly. She poured the remaining alcohol in the bottle onto her head. The alcohol flowed down her hair and dripped onto her tender shoulders, soaking her sexy, tight-fitting chest. This sort of action was unable to sober her up. The drunk woman staggered out of the alleyway, but she ran into a few mischievous hoodlums. In the next moment, the empty bottle of alcohol exploded on the heads of this group of blind fools. Luonan smiled wryly, and the heart's lantern spun once more. This time, the heart's lantern moved over 100 kilometers away. It was already outside the main city district of Xia City. The beam of light from the heart's lantern descended, and the specter that was shuttling through the void suddenly came to a stop. The heavily chained crow that was pulled out from the depths of the mental plane collapsed, but the incorporeal binding and pressure that followed caused the specter to instinctively tremble all the more. For a time, it didn't budge no matter how the person in charge of grazing urged it. The heart's lantern illuminated them one by one, and Luonan saw ink let out a coarse squawk. It ignored the restlessness of its own kind and the curses of the residents. It flew up and circled in the night sky. Luonan also saw Xie Junping, who was at a certain religious site. He raised his head to look all around, but he was at a loss. There was also another person. Her slender body lay quietly on a sickbed. Her eyelids moved slightly, but she never opened them. Correspondingly, a lone star that had been hidden for a long time streaked across the living starry sky. It circled half a circle before fading away once more. Everything returned to tranquility. Luonan looked around, and the glow of the heart's lantern grew brighter. It reflected into his heart, causing Luonan to suddenly come to a realization. The living starry sky was warping, but he was actually quite familiar with the order that appeared within the warping. He was even more familiar with it than the multiple explanations of the spatial order of modern physics. He lowered his head to look at the notebook in his hand. There was the classic visualization diagram that he had just drawn. Of course, There was also the title page of his grandfather's notebook, the general outline of formatting theory, the structure of a tetrahedron, inscribed sphere, and circumscribed sphere. If it weren't for this intuitive and concise diagram structure, and the corresponding theory as a prerequisite, Luo Nan would probably have been lost within the bizarre laws of the living starry sky. But now he was very clear that the warping of the living starry sky was not some new toy. Instead, it was with him as the core. It was driven by him, warped by him, and divided into levels. The distance of the millions upon millions of life sketches was not calculated based on spatial distance. Instead, it was calculated based on their usefulness to him. They formed many levels and they could be named student, employee, pilot, clergyman, politician. Yes, the intuitive structure of the Star Atlas format pyramid had melted away, but it was seamlessly integrated into the structure of the living starry sky. Its rules were no longer like geometric diagrams. After undergoing a high level of generalization, they appeared simple and intuitive. Instead, they were hidden deep within the living starry sky, appearing in an objective and subtle form. Perhaps Luo Nan was just a naive and clumsy student when faced with the boundless and majestic living starry sky, but he had long since obtained a standard answer. Chapter 371. Once again, Luo Nan discovered that his train of thought had run too far. What he wanted to do at first was just to observe the heavily chained crow. But who would have thought that this toy would undergo a phaseless transformation the moment he made contact with it? It transformed into an incorporeal power that enveloped the living starry sky. It naturally guided him to the level of my heart's a prison. The range expanded in an instant, and the relevant connections became even more complicated. Most people would not be able to separate themselves. Looking at the effects of the self-format on the living starry sky, how could one clearly distinguish between inside and outside? Right now, only the core of the dense cluster of stars still maintained the outline of the self-format. It could correspond with the classical visualization diagram. As for the societal format, the tetrahedron was already old news. This toy could be said to encompass the entire living starry sky. In any case, from the concept of formatting theory, the societal format was centered around the self. It formed a social structure that could be used by the self. There was no problem with this judgment, given the strength of the current distortion of the living starry sky. Just these 2 points encompassed everything that Luo Nan could currently observe with clairvoyance. Even so, there was still no place for the heaven and earth format. If Luo Nan still wanted to observe the heavily chained crow in this situation, he would be under the suspicion of not turning back until he hit a brick wall. Luo Nan pondered that he could set a slightly broader target for his observation. He still remembered that half a month ago, he had received Gym Master Xiu's guidance in the Daoguan. He had entered a deep meditative state, and had seen the internal structure of the self-format. He only remembered that the chains were crisscrossing, dense like a spiderweb, mysterious and unfathomable. Would such a situation change after the heavily chained crow mutated, and became illusory? Luo Nan was even more afraid that he would do something else with this thought. He no longer hesitated, and the light of the heart lantern changed direction. This time, his telepathic thoughts successfully penetrated the dense cluster of stars. They collided head-on with the brilliant and powerful light that was like the radiance of a myriad of stars. Fortunately, such a powerful light only flashed on the mental plane. The heart lantern of the eye's orifice swayed slightly, automatically adjusting its interference strength and changing the coupling method. This wave of powerful light dissipated into nothingness. Luo Nan had once heard Gym Master Xiu say that the heart lantern of the eye's orifice was the first of the 9 orifices and 6 roots in the act of introspection. After all, everyone was used to using their eyes to observe. Viewing the scenery and taking images was the most suitable habit. Especially since Luo Nan had mixed in the marvelous coupling effect. The mental plane and the material plane interfered effectively. It was like a gentle breeze and faint light. No matter how deep and indistinct the land was, it could be seen. It could be touched. The corresponding information was much more abundant. Through the effective integration of the consciousness, Luonan felt as if he was immersed in the scene. At this moment, it was as if Luonan had crashed into the center of a galaxy. It was as if he was surrounded by the twinkling stars of a high-density stellar group. It seemed to be near yet far, and it surrounded him from all directions. On the other hand, it was like he'd encountered an enormous black hole at the forefront of his thoughts. It was dark and deep, and it intended to completely swallow his mind. It was indeed different from the last deep meditation experience. Luonan's mind went straight to the depths of the black hole. The heart lantern of the eye's orifice pierced through the gloom, illuminating the deep space below. Wow, it's not easy. Luonan was a bit surprised. The clairvoyant scene before his eyes overlapped with the scene in his memories to a large extent. Formatting theory's star atlas transformation was so intense, but the core area of the self-format still maintained its basic structure. It manifested as a bottomless pit of deep space. Endless dark chains crisscrossed and weaved together, forming a complex and dense structure. Of course, the details had changed quite a bit. The last time Luonan's thoughts entered, the space was dark and misty. It was as if it were a black prison constructed by a demonic god. All hope was trapped, and it possessed an unshakable dignity of deep silence. Back then, he had gathered all the vital energy in his body with great difficulty. He had wanted to feed the soul flame in the depths of the prison, but it had been sucked dry by the great net of chains. In the end, only a few pitiful strands remained, and they trickled down. This was why Gym Master Xiao commented that Luonan couldn't use his skills on himself. Gym Master Xiao even said that Luonan could absorb external techniques. This was what Gym Master Xiao meant. However, many days had passed, and the situation was vastly different. Luonan had built his foundation through internal refinement. He had achieved success in the eye's orifice, and he had comprehended the coupling technique. The God gear and body gear meshed and revolved, and the interference between the mental and material planes deepened layer by layer. Every step of progress was clear and real. Luonan could see that the stability of the deep space seemed to be wavering a bit. From time to time, subtle explosions would transmit through, causing the tens of thousands of chains to rattle. Upon closer inspection, one could see some structural changes and reorganization. If one were to insist on saying that these unforeseen events were affected by the star atlas transformation, then it would be very hard to find a similar explanation for the increase in brightness and temperature of the deep black prison. The heart lantern of the eye's orifice took a look within itself. Luonan's thoughts did not need to dive too deep. He could clearly see the halo of light at the bottom layer through the many layers of chain structure. There was also a bit of heat that rose up, closely intersecting with the vital energy that constantly seeped in. Looking down a bit further, the soul flame could be seen within the net of chains. It was extremely lively, especially when the beam of light from the heart lantern fell down. The energies of the two sides connected, and the soul flame became a bit crazed. It exploded and ignited, and the tail of flame soared. It broke through the lowest layer of the net of chains, and was about to burn to the middle section. Luonan could vaguely see that the lowest layer of chains had broken. Half of the chain hung down from the tightly woven net of chains. It lay low by the side of the soul flame, receiving an even more intense calcination. There was a great sign of mutation. Wonderful. Truly wonderful. Luonan already had a general confirmation. If the star atlas transformation of the format pyramid was said to be the embodiment of formatting theory's external influence and method of use, then this black prison was the embodiment of his level of control and manipulation over formatting theory. In the past, he could only be said to be a user of formatting theory. He was like a driver, a jailer. He had to act strictly according to the rules drawn by formatting theory. But the current situation was clearly reflected. No matter what sort of changes the star atlas transformation of the format pyramid brought, formatting theory, this external technique, was suppressing Luonan's core strength. It was shaking, and Luonan began to obtain more and more autonomy. His progress was without a doubt. Luonan couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. What would happen if the soul flame completely covered this dark prison, completely incinerating these thousands upon thousands of dark chains? What sort of situation would that be? Luonan let out a long breath. He felt that he had gained a great deal, so he temporarily stopped his internal clairvoyance. He drew a perfect end to today's closed-door training. It was already late. His aunt and uncle would probably be back soon. It would not be good to hole up in his room any longer. Luonan's body fell back, and he stretched his back on the bed. He moved his muscles and bones a bit, relieving the strain of sitting for a long time. But a certain feeling collided with his mind just as he unfolded his arms. It caused his body to freeze on the spot. His soul strength seemed to have grown again. It was explosive. Chapter 372. What the hell? Luonan really did jump out of bed. His head instantly swelled up. This didn't make sense. He didn't have an out-of-body state. He didn't sense the wraith sign hunting. He didn't do anything else. Fine, he did quite a few things. But what did these things have to do with the explosive increase in soul strength? He immediately restrained his thoughts and returned to a more realistic plane. He observed the coupling of the god and body gears. The water level of the vast iceberg ocean continued to rise. It showed no signs of stopping. He had already jumped out of the mental plane. Was it still not over? Could it be that the "my heart's a prison" mode created vampires? Why? Fine. Why again? Luonan calmed his mind and tossed aside the relevant questions. He helplessly returned to the mental plane. He concentrated his mind and searched for the crux of the problem. The formatting theory system had completely merged with the living starry sky. Luonan also knew the standard answer in advance. He understood the relevant operating principles. Many things appeared especially intuitive. Without the tangible chains, the formatting theory system that covered the starry sky turned into an incorporeal prison. Luonan changed the locking mode of the chains, but the prison was simply wiped out in one go. Under the constraints of the incorporeal laws, the various living beings under the starry sky more or less reacted to Luonan. The vast majority of them had relatively small effects, but they could accumulate and naturally form a scale. Looking at it from this angle, Luonan suddenly had a hypothesis. It was just a hypothesis. The reason for the uncontrollable growth of soul strength. From the current state of the living starry sky, a complete formatting theory system was not just Luonan's single-person mode. It encompassed the vast structure of all living beings within the range of his perception. It was like a planetary system. Luonan was the sun at the center of the system. He possessed the greatest mass. He formed a gravitational force that attracted the other celestial bodies in the vast starry sky to revolve around him. A few of his believers interacted with him to a deeper degree. They were the planets, asteroids, comets, and so on of the system. The vast majority of people interacted with him to a very shallow degree. They were far away from him. They didn't even belong to this star system, but they more or less had a connection with him. If it was just a planetary system, then so be it. But there were many more links in the interaction between people. Using coupling theory to explain, the formatting theory system was composed of many gears, big and small, inside and outside, pieced together. Under the strict system of principles, they were all one, forming an exquisite internal structure. Each level, each rank, each group, each distinction. They interlocked with each other to form an exquisite transmission. In the end, all rivers converged to the core of the formatting theory system, which was Luonan's body. On a deeper level, the mode where multiple gears and gear sets worked together was like a gigantic machine that distorted the void. With it as the core, energy and raw materials were collected from various levels. And with that as the foundation, more and more soul power was produced. The function of this production line was too powerful, and there was no limit to it. It continued to produce until there was a relative overcapacity, and an economic crisis occurred. Right now Luonan was facing a crisis of relative excess. Wasn't it good to have more soul energy? Of course it was good, but please give him the physique of an extraordinary first. Only then would he be able to completely digest and make use of it. What extraordinary physique? Of course it was just wishful thinking, but since he didn't have it, it meant that he didn't have enough purchasing power. Even if he really needed it, he couldn't afford it. Even if they gritted their teeth and took out a loan to buy it, The long-term pressure of the interest would be enough to crush them. When production and consumption were out of balance, the crisis would naturally come. Luonan's brain began to go out of control at this point. He couldn't avoid letting his imagination run wild. He felt that he was like a factory owner who couldn't find a market, a clumsy capitalist. If the excess products could be dumped into a river or thrown into an incinerator like milk, he would gladly do it. The problem was that he couldn't even find a channel that could carry them. The void depository of the external neuron was once a deep lake, but now it was filled to the brim. As for a furnace that could incinerate soul power, it would be more refreshing to just admit that it was a hole in his brain. Luonan began to circle around the bed, but he couldn't completely shake off the influence of his brain. Of course, he didn't really want to find an incinerator. He just wanted to walk along the line of an economic crisis. With his newly acquired knowledge of mechanical design, he managed to come up with a strange idea. He should have intervened. A smart factory owner could completely change the function of the production line in a situation where he had sufficient capital. He could produce new products and open up new markets, even if he had to consume a bit more. TSK. It was said that he was purely observing, but in the end he broke the rules again. But this idea that suddenly popped up was far too wonderful. He couldn't help but put in mental effort. He pondered over it. Actually, he didn't need to remodel the entire production line. He just needed to add one more link. He just needed to continuously consume the products of the work department. Burn and refine essence. This was Luonan's first thought. Gym Master Xio once said that this sort of refinement of essence into energy required the participation of the mind. In turn, it tempered the mind and increased its level. This was a refining process of soul power. But there were too many things to pay attention to in this course, especially when it was nearing completion. Jade gives birth to amethyst smoke was incessantly burned and refined from day to night. The essence had long since been boiled dry, and one would go berserk. Then what should he burn? Perhaps Luonan was affected by the hole in his brain that was the incinerator, but he was more interested in burning and refining. Suddenly, there was a muffled thud. Luonan kicked the lower edge of the large bed frame. He didn't care about the pain. He vented all his strength into smacking the bed. Burn and refine the external neuron. The so-called reversal of true energy used the body gear as the lead to drive the God gear. With the addition of interference effects, it could completely consume soul power. And looking at it from this angle, the body gear was like fire. The external neuron, which possessed the hollow depository, did not store soul power. It stored a lake of crude oil. Wouldn't it be possible to find something by setting a fire on it? Hold on. Only now did Luonan have the time to hiss in pain. He rubbed his toes. The pain brought him a sense of crisis. He had to admit that this idea was too rash. There were no actual phenomena or data to support it. A single mishap would lead to an unsalvageable situation. He needed to do a few experiments and gather some data before making a decision. After all, the external neuron was not a part of his body. No one knew what would happen if it was burned and refined for an extended period of time. In this way, the production line transformation could not be carried out for a while. It was more practical to pour milk. How could he waste it? Consume it? Luonan scratched his head. The pain in his toes had weakened a bit. He sat back on the bed and subconsciously flipped through his notebook. He wanted to find inspiration to solve this problem. But unfortunately, inspiration was a thing. It would always appear when there were too many restrictive conditions. In the end, it was hard for his imagination to solve practical problems. Chapter 373. His fingers paused, revealing 2 pieces of greenish-yellow paper sandwiched between the split pages of the notebook. They looked rough, but strangely glossy. This was a paper talisman given to him by Papercut. It was a top-quality product personally made by the famous psychic of the branch, Mr. Gao. Luonan used it to practice his soul strength activation techniques, strengthening the effects of his interference power. Last week at Ocean Sky Cloud City, the paper dolls he made had also made a contribution. Originally, this was a good method of pouring milk. Back then, Luonan had relied on this method to consume his excess soul strength and reduce the pressure on his body. But now that Luonan had comprehended the technique of coupling, the framework of the God gear and the body gear had taken shape. He no longer had a bottleneck in terms of interference power. He could use a fraction of his strength to achieve 100% of his previous effectiveness. He could stop using up energy. At present, he had not given up on this technique. He would always find time to practice it. Now there were only 2 pieces of talisman paper left. There were more than 20 little paper men sandwiched between the 2 pieces of talisman paper. Little paper men fluttered in the air with a puff of air. They scattered on the bed and on the floor. But just as they touched the ground, they were like live monkeys. They grabbed the corners of Luonan's clothes and cuffs, fighting to be the first to jump back. Some simply climbed all the way to Luonan's head and shoulders, treating Luonan like a monkey mountain. What paper man? It was clearly a paper monkey. Luonan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his shoulders and shook his head, removing the group of paper monkeys. The heart monkey technique that Papercut had imparted to him was still too troublesome. Later on, Luonan wanted to learn the equestrian technique from Papercut. It was said that it had the power of armored horses in novels. It could carry heavy loads and soar over land. It could be said to have a miraculous effect. Luonan's anxious mood was alleviated quite a bit with this. Previously, he was just depressed by the recurrence of his illness and lost his composure. Now that he thought about it, he had the foundation of the coupling technique, and was no longer in a dilemma. So what if his soul power increased again? If opening the eye's orifice wasn't enough, he could open the mouth and tongue orifice. If that didn't work, he could open the ear's orifice, life orifice, and death orifice. Wouldn't it be balanced again? Patting his cheeks, he put away the paper monkeys and put them back into the book, taking the opportunity to organize his thoughts. In the end, he sent a message to Papercut through the hexa ear. Brother Papercut, do you have a big move for soul force activation? Big move? Papercut was chatting with someone in the tea house outside. He didn't react for a moment when he received the message. It's a very powerful move that consumes a lot of energy. Our method is like casting a spell, preparing a big move in advance. There's no need to panic. Papercut nearly choked when he heard Luonan's words. He apologized to the female friend across from him, got up, and went to a corner with no one around. He chuckled and responded, "My dear boss Luo, if I had such a big move, I would have dared to rush to be ranked today. Do you believe me?" Luonan was a bit disappointed. Then there's nothing else. Let's not talk about whether or not such a move exists. The key is that there's a limit to how much the talisman paper can hold. Old Gao's paper talismans were the best of the best in the vicinity of Xia City, but when the interference force was increased to a certain degree, it would spontaneously combust. Therefore, activation style like me has a life of support. I live my days on the spot. Boss Luo, you have the strength but nowhere to use it. You can switch to the control style. You have the talent for it. Papercut had an extremely good temperament. Even though Luonan had disturbed his date, he was very patient. He gave Luonan an explanation and even gave a suggestion. I told you before that the society has specialized combat machines. They may not be comparable to the Deep Blue Walkers in terms of both internal and external integration, but their power is still outstanding. Relying on your level of interference force after your epiphany, and then learning microcontrol and mechanical principles from old Jai, you can play with this toy to the fullest. Luonan grunted twice. Papercut thought that Luonan was moved and felt that it was a bit of a pity. After all, there weren't many people like Luonan, who could cultivate the heart of the ape technique to spirituality in such a short amount of time. There were very few people interested in the activation style. Now that they lacked an up-and-coming talent, they inevitably became weaker. However, Papercut's mind was clear. He continued to laugh and said, "It just so happens that I have a flywheel arm in my collection. Although it hasn't been sharpened, it is the most basic of combat machines. If you want to get started, you can try it out. I'll bring it over when you have time." Okay. If Brother Papercut isn't busy, then next Monday is fine. Though Luonan said this, He wasn't really interested in switching to the control style. This was because this style always made him think of the Deep Blue Walkers. Plus, Papercut's words made it even more awkward. Plus, he didn't really need a big move to protect himself. He just wanted to find a channel to pour milk. Luo Nan was disappointed. He was just about to say a few more polite words and hang up when Papercut became concerned about his recent situation. Headquarters has been quite well behaved lately. It seems that Deputy Secretary General Gong ate some bad luck. He went into closed-door training when he got back. It's okay. The branch has taken good care of me. Then you suddenly want to hold back a big move. Hey, Miss Yuan, what are you doing? I'm sorry. Something urgent suddenly came up. I need to go take care of it. Let's talk later. Okay. Later. The beautiful Miss Yuan didn't even have the patience to listen to Papercut's words, even though she said they would talk later. She didn't even have the slightest intention of turning around. She swayed as she walked out of the tea house, quickly disappearing into the stream of people. She at least made a special trip to say something. Papercut sighed. He loosened his collar and walked back to his previous seat. He stretched and relaxed his body, and a smile appeared on his slightly plump face. Brother Papercut? Luo Nen couldn't see the situation over there, but he could feel that something not very harmonious had happened. Moreover, it was most likely related to his call. Am I bothering you? It's nothing. It's nothing. The more beautiful a girl is, the harder it is to coax her. Besides, I just saw that she was pretty. I harbored evil intentions. Where were we? Brother Papercut, since you have something to do, we can talk about it when we meet on Monday. I said it's nothing. Waiter, give me an extra plate of snacks. Papercut's tone was relaxed. He continued to chat with Luo Nan with a beaming smile. If you really feel guilty, then introduce me to a female student from Acumen College. She has to be over 20 years old. I'm afraid I'll turn into a beast if she's too young. Luo Nan stuttered a few times. Even he himself wasn't sure if he should agree or not. Papercut chewed on the snacks in his mouth as he spoke indistinctly. All right. Let's talk about a big move. If you really want a big move, you don't need to look for it in the activation class. Open your mind. There are many things under the heavens that are suitable for you. For example, you can pay attention to an honor point mission from headquarters. The serial number is RT-8313. There might be a pleasant surprise there. Headquarters. Luo Nan was instinctively a bit afraid. Papercut could understand, so he eased Luo Nan's mind and said, the mission is hung in headquarters, but its roots are in Arxia City. You'll know when you see it. The Hexaear was able to completely achieve telepathic control in this sort of operation. A thought flashed through Luo Nan's mind as he and Papercut spoke, and the interface switched to the official mission release board of the Wilderness Explorers Society. Luo Nan locked onto the relevant information. Chapter 374. Luo Nan scratched his head in his bedroom. He felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Papercut laughed mischievously in the tea house. Do you see that? Her Majesty Empress Wu personally hung it up 3 years ago. The content is to collect soul force samples and analyze their basic properties and production principles. TSK, a big question. Luo Nan let out a sigh. No matter how big the hole in his brain was, he could only keep a respectful distance when encountering this sort of fundamental research that involved the essence of the problem. From this, one could see the foresight and boldness of an extraordinary. Right, 3 years ago, Her Majesty Empress Wu was not an extraordinary. However, Luo Nan didn't understand. What does this have to do with a big move? This is where Her Majesty the Martial Empress is awesome. She wanted to collect the soul force data of the entire world's ability users. Just like collecting fingerprints and DNA information. It was more or less a taboo. Even if the point reward was generous, not many people were willing to do it in the beginning, so the progress was rather slow. Later, she came up with an idea. You can look at attachment 2, the payment agreement for information collection. Luo Nan didn't act according to Papercut's intentions. The familiar feeling grew more and more intense. He couldn't help but think hard. Where in the world have I heard this before? After all, his social circle was very narrow, and he didn't have many choices. Soon he slapped his thigh. The martial emperor's secret technique, subdue the world by force. Papercut laughed again. Aha, you also know that it was Bamboo Pole who taught you. Yes, I have a rough idea. Luo Nan had indeed heard about this matter from the notes on the major characters of the world course. As for why Luo Nan didn't think of Her Majesty Empress Wu for a time, it was because there were far too many marvelous deeds. Bamboo Pole, who taught the class, emphasized the description of many aspects of Luo Nan's character. Though this matter had a great impact, Bamboo Pole only spent a few minutes to explain it. He made the connection, the details, and so on. Then Bamboo Pole treated it as an extended assignment after class, letting Luo Nan do his own homework. Luo Nan was pressed for time, so he didn't really get involved. He passed it by mistake. At present, he only knew that in this event that shook the inner world, Her Majesty the Martial Empress had displayed her inconceivable boldness. On the mission issuance interface, she had publicly imparted an astonishing attack technique, which had instantly ignited the entire inner world. The current research on supernatural powers was still in its early stages, and some of the advanced research results had yet to be disseminated. Most of the ability users in this world were still in an instinctive state of ignorance about how to use their own abilities. Her Majesty Empress Wu grasped the minds of these people, publicizing a profound technique that was extremely suitable for the awakened level. Its allure instantly crushed most of the people's defenses. For a time, cultivating the martial emperor's secret technique became common practice. Not to mention the awakened, even the higher-level architects and transcendents practiced and researched it. From that moment on, Her Majesty Empress Wu's fame truly spread throughout the world. Papercut helped Luo Nan enrich the details. Her Majesty Empress Wu spent a large sum of money to build a special data collection network before the release of the Dripping Sword secret technique. She borrowed the East Wind and spent a mere 2 years to collect over 40,000 effective samples of ability users of all levels. There was a gap of a year in between. At the beginning of this year, she released a technique suitable for architects, or B-rank power users. At present, the number of valid samples has not been calculated, but it should not be too little. I estimate that there should be at least 300 to 500 samples. The number of B-class experts might seem small, but considering the number of B-class experts, the ratio was quite high. This is the 3rd year. Her Majesty Empress Wu has already advanced to become an extraordinary. We are all guessing that this year or next year, it is very likely that she will bring out an even higher level technique. Oh, the extraordinary level. How magnanimous. Luo Nan had to admire her. Yeah. Although this sort of technique became a common commodity once it was released on the internet, it's still quite good to have a technique at your disposal. The more Papercut thought about it, the more reliable he felt it was. Next, he did his best to recommend. Her Majesty Empress Wu's technique is famous for being reliant on control. The same dripping sword can be used by one person to exterminate a powerful enemy like slaughtering a dog, while the other person can't even kill a chicken. There are situations like this. Your spirit enhancement is in the precision direction. I am very confident in your control. Dripping sword. Luo Nan finally opened attachment 2. He looked at the name of the technique displayed inside and muttered to himself for a time. You should learn it first. Her Majesty Empress Wu's techniques are more inclined towards the mental side. The requirements for the fleshly body aren't too high. It just so happens to suit you. I've learned the dripping sword. It really is out of the ordinary. At the very least, it has unexpected effects. As he spoke, Papercut sent over a file through the hexa ear. Her Majesty Empress Wu personally wrote the lecture notes for last year's intermediate training class. It has to do with the dripping sword. The introduction is extremely detailed. There are also on-the-spot demonstrations and demonstrations during the lecture. This is a treatment that only our Xia City branch can enjoy. Even a year later, we can sell it for tens of thousands of dollars to the outside world. There are also notes I made. You can take a look. After all, my talent in this field is limited. Thank you, Brother Papercut. Luonan knew that these class notes were very secretive things. For Papercut to be able to take them out showed his trust in Luonan. Papercut didn't care. This is nothing. I've seen your recent progress. Secretary He's arrangement of classes will involve this step as well. I'm just giving you special treatment ahead of time. Plus, I owe you a favor for the matter with old Jai. Worker Jai? Old Jai is a capable person, but his talent and cultivation is far too lacking. He is always a bit away from awakening, so he can't enjoy some resources. Him being your teacher can be counted in honor points. If you exchange it for resources, your chances of success will increase. It doesn't matter if you succeed or not. You can at least give him a bit of comfort. Luonan didn't agree with this saying. You can't say it like that. Worker Jai gave me supplementary lessons. He taught me even more. I still need to thank you, Brother Papercut, for finding me such a good teacher. Tisk, it's so sour. Let's not flatter each other. I'll call old Jai out one day, and everyone can have a good meal. Okay. Luonan made a mental note of this. In this way he would have 2 rounds with Papercut. It didn't matter, but introducing a female student. What a headache. Luonan's mind cleared up just as he was about to end the call. He had nearly forgotten his original intention of pouring milk. He mulled over Papercut's description of the dripping sword. It didn't seem like a high-energy consumption skill. Luonan hurriedly asked, "What about the B-rank technique? Do you have the lecture notes?" "It's suitable for architects. It's called the heart-searing blade. It's said to be extremely sharp, but I don't recommend that you come into contact with it right now." Papercut downed his already cold tea in one gulp. He began to earnestly lecture Luonan. "Nanster, there are indeed quite a few people who view you as a B-rank power, but you're still lacking a bit, right? Take a look at the dripping sword first. This technique is extremely amazing. It also highlights the characteristics of Her Majesty Empress Wu's technique. If you feel that you can use it freely, then take a step further, okay? I know. I just want to gather some information in advance." Though Luonan said this, he still felt weak in his heart. Chapter 375. Sister Yuan? Luonan grew more and more diffident. This sort of action of biting off more than one could chew would most likely not receive He Yuan's support. Papercut added, "However, if it involves personal understanding and experience, it would be best to find someone who was present at the time of the lecture. It would be even better to impart the teachings of their hearts." There were only a few B-class experts in the branch, and even fewer in the spiritual type. Old Yu Horn Demon Old Gao Mr. Bai? He read out a string of names. Luonan found the names familiar. Aren't these the psychics of Xia City? Old Man Yu was one of the Iron Triangle of Xia City. He was known alongside Ouyang Chen and Her Majesty Empress Wu. The centaur was said to be an adventurous madman with a tendency to self-destruct. He wandered in the wilderness every day, looking for excitement. Old Gao was the creator of the paper talisman in Luonan's hand. He was a Daoist with an inheritance, and he was half a disciple of Old Yu. As for Mr. Bai, Luonan was even more familiar with him. They had fought side by side before, and Mr. Bai had even given Luonan a diagnosis and treatment. His daughter was Bai Xinyan, the mysterious medical doctor with a strange stance. He suddenly discovered that the psychics of Xia City were quite peculiar. Excluding Luonan, who was half a psychic, there were a total of 4 psychics. Perhaps the ratio wasn't high when compared to over 1,000 ability users, but all of them were of the architect rank. They were B-rank powerhouses. In the entire Xia City branch, how many powerhouses were there at B-rank or higher? There were a total of 14 people on record, which was already one of the best out of the 88 branches in the world. Among them, shamans accounted for nearly a third of them, which was very impressive. Luonan was a bit distracted, and Papercut pulled him back. "I can help you ask Old Gao. It's just that this fellow is a bit unscrupulous. He might try to rip you off." "Sweat, you used to have a large supply of talisman paper. How many of them were taken advantage of?" Luonan suddenly felt that he really should find an opportunity to give thanks to the teachers who taught him his skills. Luonan didn't want Papercut to return to this matter. He thought for a bit and said, "Maybe we can look for Mr. Bai." The old man seemed to have a good temperament and character. He should be easier to talk to than the profiteer Mr. Gao. "That's right, you've been treated by White Salt for such a long time. So it can be considered a bit of fate. He'll definitely pay attention to you, just don't take the initiative to mention it." "I know." Luonan understood tacitly. It wasn't news that the father and daughter of the Bai family didn't get along. "Wait. Why does it sound like you want me to find someone?" Luonan opened his mouth, but he was speechless. It was his own business, so of course he had to do it himself. However, with his otaku personality, he would feel great pressure even if he took the initiative to contact someone, let alone ask for help. After all, Mr. White was still his senior, and he wasn't that familiar with him. In any case, Luonan could no longer let Papercut do this for him. He could only grit his teeth and agree. It was also at this moment that he suddenly thought of something. If every time he went into seclusion to cultivate, he would have to lose control and spend a lot of energy to clean up after himself. Would it be worth it? Mrs. Luo Shuqing was a bit baffled during breakfast the next morning. She kept feeling that something was off with Luonan. In the end, he couldn't help but ask, "What are you so conflicted about?" "Oh." Luonan tightly stuffed a large amount of meat into his mouth. When he raised his head, he had an innocent expression on his face. "Your eyebrows are all knotted, and you still say you're not conflicted?" Luonan swallowed the slice of meat with great difficulty. He continued to play dumb. "Are you conflicted?" "Oh, my forehead is fighting with the marginal lobes." In the end, Mrs. Luo Shuqing's attainments in psychology were decent. She went around in circles and finally understood. In psychology, the prefrontal cortex represented rationality and self-control, while the marginal lobes represented impulsive emotions. It could also be understood as the struggle between long-term benefits and short-term benefits. Luonan was just speaking carelessly and he shivered. However, his words did contain some true emotions. He didn't go looking for Mr. Bai last night. The reason was that he wasn't familiar with Mr. Bai. It was too late, and he was afraid of disturbing Mr. Bai's rest. To put it bluntly, his otaku cancer flared up. He displayed a fear of interpersonal relationships. He dragged it out as long as he could. He knew how to kill someone he was familiar with, and in the end, he went looking for Secretary He. He learned that the branch's database did indeed have a recording of the high-level seminar back then. However, Luonan wasn't able to get his hands on it. He Yuan warned him very bluntly not to bite off more than he could chew. The B-rank technique, Heart Incineration Blade, involved too many elements. Many of them were knowledge unique to architects. Without a solid foundation, forcefully practicing was no good. Essentially speaking, Luonan hadn't even reached the standard of an awakened due to the imbalance between his body and soul. This was a problem with the standard. It wouldn't change just because his combat strength was superb. A missile that could explode at any time was indeed more frightening and destructive than a refined rifle. However, the control power needed to be looked at the other way around. Last night, Luonan even asked how to pour the milk. Oh no, he asked how to use his ultimate move. In the end, He Yuan saw through his worsening condition of the imbalance between his body and soul. Only after tossing and turning for a while did he avoid the pain of inspection. He didn't get any results in his training that night. It was hard for Luonan to avoid feeling emotional. However, he had forgotten that his aunt had been paranoid these past 2 days. She was worried that Luonan had stepped into some domain. Luo Shuqing immediately became nervous when he heard his vague and suggestive words. "Did that firm come to recruit you again?" Luonan slapped himself in the face in his mind and cursed his foul mouth. He rushed to ease Luo Shuqing's mind. "Nope. I haven't contacted them for the past 2 days. They were just speaking carelessly." It would have been better if he didn't explain. The more he explained, the more Luo Shuqing became suspicious. She put down her bowl and chopsticks, wanting to understand the situation in depth. At this time, Mo Haihang, who was swiping at the table and reading the newspaper, suddenly jumped out with a sentence. "Actually, if there's no danger, you can give it a try. Young people are just trial and error. Only by making mistakes can you gather effective information. He brought out the trial and error theory again, and this time he took it a step further. You can go to their firm and try it out. See if it suits your heart. If you want to do it, then draft up a contract and bring it back for your aunt to help examine it. You're in high school now. Financial independence can be put on the agenda. Luo Shuqing turned to glare angrily at her husband, but she soon understood something. She furrowed her brows in silence. There was one more person who was at a loss. They clearly wanted to get to the bottom of things. Luo Nan knew long ago that his aunt and uncle were worried about the direction of the so-called trial and error theory. He could see through them with a single glance. He couldn't help but feel even more depressed. He groaned in his mind. It's all a misunderstanding. He began to ponder whether or not he should ask Zhang Yingying for help. She should set up a trap and play a two-man show to calm the hearts of these two elders. Breakfast ended hastily amidst the confusion and probing. Today was Sunday, November 4th, 2096. The accidental injury in the morning seemed to have given a bad start to the day's schedule. Luo Nan's aunt and uncle, as well as Mo Yen, went out to do their own things after breakfast. Luo Nan continued to stay at home, carelessly observing the star atlas of the format pyramid. He was intimidated by the continuously increasing water level of the vast ocean of icebergs. He dejectedly withdrew from the fixed space, holding his head in distress. He couldn't delve any deeper into the homework related to formatting theory before he found a suitable channel to pour milk. Even the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger division technique personally taught by the gym master couldn't be considered due to too many connections. As for the internal refinement technique of the 9 orifices and 6 roots, Luo Nan had already mastered it during the morning class. There was no need to superfluously paint a snake with legs. Luo Nan had been at home for an entire day. He needed to do something, right? Luo Nan rolled around on his bed twice. In the end, he had no other choice but to follow Papercut's suggestion. He opened up the mission posting page for soul strength information gathering and flipped through the dripping sword teaching materials that Papercut had sent over. He wanted to see if he could discover anything interesting from it. For the fastest and most error-free novel reading, please visit. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.